Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you're here with us today because we are going to talk about something that I guarantee you have experienced.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that highly relatable, incredibly frustrating feeling of really wanting to learn a new skill, like something big, something that could actually be life-changing.
Right.
But the second you sit down to actually do it, you just feel completely overwhelmed by everything you supposedly need to succeed.
Yeah, the prerequisites.
Exactly. You start thinking, I need massive amounts of free time. Or I need a ton of money for formal classes. I need the perfect distraction-free environment. And before you even take the first step, you've talked yourself right out of it.
You psych yourself out.
We all have that metaphorical graveyard of good intentions in our closets, right? The pristine running shoes, the acoustic guitar just gathering dust.
It's a universal experience. I mean, it is so incredibly common to look at a mountain of a goal and decide that you cannot possibly start climbing until you have the absolute highest grade professional climbing gear. You convince yourself that starting small is just a waste of time. And that paralysis, that overwhelming need for the perfect setup, is exactly what we're going to dismantle today.
Because today we're pulling from a really fascinating piece titled The Power of Small Daily Habits in English Mastery, which originally featured on the Easy English podcast.
Fantastic source.
Yeah, it's great. And our mission for this deep dive is to completely deconstruct the myth that you need perfect conditions to master a complex skill like a new language. And more importantly, we're going to extract the exact step-by-step blueprint for rapid solitary improvement.
And look, I want to validate any frustration you, the listener, might be feeling right now with traditional learning methods. Formal classrooms, rigid schedules, expensive tutors, they absolutely work for some people.
Sure.
But for others, they're massive roadblocks. The goal today is to look closely at how small, seemingly insignificant actions can actually reprogram the brain. We're going to use a highly specific case study from today's material that perfectly illustrates this entire process.
Let's introduce the star of our story today. Meet Daniel. Okay.
Now, Daniel's ultimate goal is something millions of people dream of. He wants to speak fluent English. And he's doing what a lot of us do when we kind of sort of want to learn something.
The casual stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
He's engaging with the casual stuff. He watches movies in English. He listens to the music. He'll occasionally read an article online. But whenever he actually thinks about seriously studying the language, he hits this massive mental wall.
And those roadblocks are built from very specific limiting beliefs. Daniel tells himself learning English alone is just too difficult.
Yeah.
He fully believes that without a teacher sitting right next to him to physically correct every single mistake he makes, he is doomed to fail.
Right. He thinks he needs to drop a ton of money on expensive, intensive courses.
Yeah.
And because these limiting beliefs are just running on a loop in his head, Daniel just keeps delaying. He tells himself, I'll start when I find a good class.
Right.
But wait, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
Why do we set the barrier to entry so impossibly high? This raises an important question. And if we look at the psychology of Daniel's delay, I'll start when I find a good class mentality is actually a brilliant self-defense mechanism.
Self-defense mechanism. How so?
It protects us from the immediate discomfort of being bad at something new. Think about it. By convincing himself that he needs a teacher, an expensive course, and a structured classroom, Daniel has created an impossible set of prerequisites.
Oh, I see.
If he doesn't have the money or the time for the perfect class, well, then he can't start. And if he can't start, he never has to face the embarrassment of mispronouncing words or failing a grammar test.
It protects his ego.
Exactly. But when you wait for those perfect conditions to magically align, you're just delaying for a few days. Those weeks turn into months, and those months turn into years.
Man, that hits close to home. It's exactly like deciding you want to get into running, but refusing to jog a single block until you've purchased a $300 pair of shoes, a high-tech smartwatch, and hired a personal trainer. You're using the lack of perfect conditions as an excuse to avoid the messy, uncomfortable beginning.
Precisely. And in Daniel's case, the years are slipping by, and he is no closer to speaking fluent English because he is trapped in the waiting room of his own expectations.
But then we hit the turning point. One evening, Daniel is just browsing the internet, and he clicks on a video about language learning. And the speaker in this video says a single sentence that completely stops Daniel in his tracks.
The light bulb moment.
Exactly. The quote is, "You don't need perfect conditions to learn a language. You need daily habits."
That is the catalyst right there. That is the moment the glass shatters for him.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Daniel actually listens to that advice. The very next day, instead of waiting for this mythical, perfect, expensive course to fall into his lap, he completely pivots.
He takes action.
Yeah, he creates a simple English routine. And when we say simple, we mean micro habits. No complicated textbooks, no 3-hour study sessions, just small actions. Let's look at habit number 1.
The morning routine.
Right. Every single morning, while Daniel is just making his breakfast, cracking eggs, making coffee, doing his normal routine, he listens to an English podcast. But here is the thing. At first, Daniel only understands a few words.
Right. He's not getting the full picture.
He is not comprehending the whole show at all. So does passive listening actually work if he doesn't know what the words mean yet? Or is it more about just getting used to the noise?
Oh, it is so much more than just noise. From a neurological standpoint, what he's doing is a profound shift. By putting the podcast on in the background while he makes breakfast, he is immersing his brain in the cadence, the intonation, and the specific rhythm of English.
Like getting an ear for the music of the language.
Exactly. When you first hear a foreign language, your brain processes it as one long, unbroken stream of sound. You literally can't tell where one word ends and another begins.
It just sounds like a blur.
Right, a complete blur. But by listening every single morning, even without knowing the vocabulary, he is training his brain's auditory processing center to find the breaks, to recognize the repeating sounds, the phonemes. He is moving away from active, stressful textbook studying and moving toward passive, consistent exposure. His brain is doing the heavy lifting in the background while he scrambles his eggs.
That is wild. He's basically laying the auditory foundation before he even builds the house.
Exactly.
And then we have habit number 2, which happens at the other end of the day. In the evening, right before he goes to sleep, Daniel reads a short story in English. Sometimes he reads very slowly. Sometimes he even repeats sentences out loud to himself in his room.
Just getting the words in his mouth.
Yeah, and he starts this habit using a specific book called Short Stories in English for Beginners from Teach Yourself. Now, I remember taking language classes in high school, and it was all about staring at lists of vocabulary words. Why do stories work so much better?
Because of contextual learning. When you encounter a new word in a textbook list, it has absolutely no context. It is just arbitrary data to memorize.
And brains don't like that.
Your brain hates arbitrary data. But when you encounter a new word in a story, it is surrounded by context clues. Let's say you're reading a story and a character is trapped in a burning building and they run to the window and scream a word you don't know.
You're going to guess that word means help or fire.
Right. Your brain has to actively work to figure out its meaning based on the narrative situation. You're emotionally invested. You want to know what happens next. And that active problem solving tied to an emotional narrative is what cements the word into your long-term memory naturally.
It bypasses the rote memorization.
Totally. It doesn't feel like a chore. The focus shifts entirely from I am studying a language to I am experiencing a story.
It is so much more effective than staring at a stack of flashcards until your eyes cross. You're actually engaged. So Daniel is doing his morning listening and his evening reading. He does this consistently for a few weeks. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Daniel adds a new habit to the mix. He begins using a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing is incredibly powerful, but we have to be honest here. It is not easy in the beginning.
Not at all. Shadowing means you are listening to someone speak English, and you attempt to repeat what you hear immediately, almost simultaneously. It's like you are casting an audio shadow over their voice.
Hence the name.
Right. And Daniel's experience with this is rough at first. It feels incredibly strange to him. He makes a ton of mistakes. He literally cannot keep up with the speaker. He's stumbling over his words, probably feeling pretty ridiculous standing alone in his room talking over a podcast.
And if you've ever tried to repeat a fast phrase in a new language and felt your tongue literally tie itself in a knot, you know exactly how silly Daniel felt right here. That awkwardness is the exact moment where most people quit. But Daniel pushes through it. You have to think about learning a new language, like learning a musical instrument, like the guitar.
Oh, I like that. How so?
The first time you try to press your fingers into a guitar chord, your hand cramps. It feels entirely unnatural. You physically cannot move your fingers fast enough to keep up with the song, and the sound you make is terrible.
Mostly just buzzing strings.
Exactly. But you keep doing it day after day. Eventually, muscle memory takes over, and your fingers just know where to go without you thinking about it. The exact same principle applies to the physical muscles in your mouth, your jaw, and your tongue.
Because your mouth is used to moving a very specific way for your native language, right?
Exactly. You are physically training your vocal tract to make completely new shapes and sounds. It requires physical repetition. By pushing through that awkward stumbling phase, Daniel is building muscle memory. Soon, his pronunciation becomes clearer and his confidence begins to grow because his mouth simply knows how to make the sounds now.
And speaking of pushing through the hard stuff, Daniel also tackles the ultimate villain of language learning, grammar.
Ah, grammar, the graveyard of language learners.
The endless tables of verb conjugations. But Daniel doesn't go back to the textbooks. He finds a second specific resource, a book called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
What's fascinating here is how Daniel discovers that learning grammar naturally, by seeing how English works in real sentences, is infinitely more effective than memorizing rigid rules.
Which is such a relief to hear, honestly.
It really is. It's the difference between reading a highly technical manual on how a combustion engine works versus actually getting behind the wheel and driving a car. Memorizing grammar rules is like reading the manual. You might pass a written test on what a clutch does, but you won't actually know how to navigate rush hour traffic.
Right. You might know the mathematical formula for torque, but you're still going to stall the car in the middle of an intersection your first time out.
Precisely. By reading stories, Daniel is driving the car. He is absorbing the grammar by witnessing it in action. He learns how sentences are constructed, not because a teacher told him a rule about past participles, but because he has seen the pattern repeated naturally hundreds of times in the narratives he enjoys. His brain just starts to recognize what sounds right.
And learning through these stories actually becomes one of the most enjoyable parts of his entire routine. Imagine that, enjoying learning grammar. But all of these small habits, the morning podcasts, the evening stories, the shadowing, they lead to a massive internal transformation for Daniel. He completely stops thinking, I can't learn English alone, and his mindset shifts to every day as an opportunity to improve.
That is the crucial turning point. That's when the language ceases to be a subject he is studying, and it becomes a lens through which he actively views his world.
He starts living the language. Even though he's alone, he starts integrating English into his daily life in these highly specific ways. While he's just walking down the street, he starts actively trying to think his thoughts in English.
That's huge.
Yeah. When he's in his kitchen cooking dinner, he speaks out loud to himself in English. He looks at objects around his apartment and describes them. At first, the sentences are super simple. The apple is red. I am walking to the store. But every single day, they become just a little bit more complex.
He has essentially turned his own home and his own internal monologue into an immersion classroom. He didn't have to buy a plane ticket travel to a foreign country or pay a dime to a tutor to get that immersion experience. He created it internally.
And then the universe decides it is time for the ultimate test. One day, Daniel is at work, and a new colleague joins the company. And this new colleague happens to speak English. Daniel realizes this is it. This is the moment. He feels nervous, which is completely understandable. But he also feels curious. So he takes a breath, walks over, and starts a small conversation with this new colleague.
The true test of everything he's been doing alone in his kitchen and his bedroom. The stakes are suddenly very real.
They are. And at first he speaks slowly. He's carefully choosing his words. But the conversation continues. It doesn't stall out. And suddenly Daniel has this amazing realization right in the middle of talking. He is communicating in English with another human being. It's working. And there's a very deliberate point we need to make here regarding the result of this test. Daniel wasn't speaking perfectly. He made mistakes.
That is the most important part of this entire story.
He wasn't speaking perfectly, but I was speaking clearly. And he was speaking confidently. The colleague understood him, and he understood the colleague. That evening, Daniel smiles to himself because he finally understands the secret. Progress doesn't come from locking yourself in a room and intensely studying grammar tables for 5 hours once a month. Progress comes from small daily habits.
Consistency over perfection. He traded the illusion of the perfect classroom for the messy reality of daily practice.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We can distill Daniel's entire journey into a core formula that you can literally start using today. Here is the exact blueprint. 10 minutes of listening, 10 minutes of reading, a few minutes of speaking, day after day, step by step.
It's so beautifully achievable. It strips away all the intimidation. You don't need a 3-hour block of free time on a Saturday. You just need 25 minutes spread throughout your normal daily activities. 10 minutes where you make coffee, 10 minutes before you fall asleep.
And to help you get to that level of clear, confident communication that Daniel achieved there is a third and final specific resource we need to talk about. It's a book called Effortless English, Learn to Speak English Like a Native. How does a resource like this fit into the blueprint?
This book perfectly aligns with Daniel's endgame. When you first start learning a language, you have a middleman in your brain. You see an apple, your brain thinks the word apple in your native language, and then you translate it to the new language. Effortless English focuses heavily on breaking that translation habit. It trains you to skip the middleman and actually think in the language directly.
So you're not doing mental gymnastics before every sentence you speak.
Exactly. It's about building confidence and speaking naturally. It is the perfect capstone to the daily habits we've discussed, moving you from someone who is translating words to someone who is simply speaking their mind.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to deliver a final, incredibly comforting message directly to you. Because if you are sitting there right now trying to learn English, or honestly trying to master any complex skill entirely on your own, you need to hear this. You do not need a classroom. You do not need perfect grammar. You don't even need a daily teacher looking over your shoulder criticizing your every move. You are not behind. You are not too late. And you are not learning too slowly. Every single word you figure out, every awkward sentence you practice in your kitchen, and every story you listen to is moving you forward. You just have to keep going.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces you to take a hard look at how we approach our ambitions in life. We've just spent this time looking at how adopting incredibly small, imperfect 10-minute daily habits, something as simple as talking to yourself out loud while chopping vegetables or putting on a podcast while making your morning eggs, can literally rewire the neural pathways in your brain to master a whole new language without any formal instruction. It really makes you wonder, what other massive, seemingly impossible goals in your life are you needlessly delaying right now simply because you were sitting around waiting for the perfect conditions to start?
Wow, that is exactly what we need to take away from this. The perfect conditions are a myth. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect gear, or the perfect class. Just take that first, messy, awkward 10-minute step today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll be right here waiting for you next time. Welcome to the deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you here with us today.
Yeah, we really are. Thanks for joining us.
Whether you're prepping for a big meeting or taking a long walk or just, indulging your own endless curiosity, we have a genuinely fascinating exploration lined up for you.
We definitely do. This one it's a bit different, but really rich.
Exactly. Because today we are digging into a piece of source material that at first glance might seem a bit unexpected for a deep dive.
Right.
It's an audio story that was originally designed specifically for English language learners.
Yeah, which is kind of a unique starting point for us.
It is, and it's titled Lena's Journey: The Balance of City and Country Life. Now, if you look at it strictly on the surface, sure, it is a practical tool. It's built for, building vocabulary and practicing pronunciation.
Doing the basic language acquisition stuff.
Right. But our mission today is to look way past those surface-level language lessons. We're going to extract the much deeper psychological and lifestyle insights hiding inside this narrative.
And there are a lot of them in there.
Because at its core, Lena's story is a profound look at the age-old tension between urban and rural living and how our external environment completely shapes our internal minds.
Okay, let's unpack this.
It is a brilliant piece of material to analyze precisely because it operates on two totally different levels.
Yeah.
On the one hand, yes, it serves as a very practical guide. It provides specific conversational prompts to help language learners articulate the pros and cons of different lifestyles.
Gives them the actual words to use.
Exactly. But on the other hand, if you look just beneath that practical layer, it is a deeply philosophical exploration of finding your ideal environment.
Which is something we all struggle with, right?
Oh, absolutely. It takes this fictional character's journey and uses it to force the listener to evaluate how the spaces we inhabit dictate our internal states. It asks some very real, very challenging questions about how we choose to live our daily lives.
And to set the stage for those questions, the story starts by painting this incredibly vivid picture of Lena's origins.
Her hometown. Yeah, she grows up in a very small village, a place completely surrounded by nature. And we get these wonderful, hyper-specific sensory details about her childhood.
The text is really descriptive here.
It really is. She wakes up every single morning to the sound of birds singing. The air is always fresh. The roads are incredibly quiet, and the people around her operate with this distinctly slow walking pace as they move through their days.
And I want to pause on that for a second, because that specific detail about the slow walking pace is crucial.
How so?
Well, when you have an environment where people simply walk slowly, It establishes a completely different baseline rhythm for life.
Oh, that makes sense.
It is a rhythm that actually allows for awareness of your surroundings and connection with other people. It's completely different from just treating walking as a frantic transit from point A to point B.
I hear that, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
A slow walking pace, quiet roads, nothing but birds singing. Isn't there a fine line between a peaceful baseline and just being incredibly understimulated? Or even downright bored?
That is a very common assumption.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us used to a modern, fast-paced lifestyle.
Right, where we always need to be doing something.
Yeah, but there's the huge difference between being bored and operating with a low cognitive load. Think about the social dynamics described in Lena's village.
Okay.
Everyone knew each other. Neighbors greeted each other every single day. She spent her time walking through green fields, and her evenings were spent watching sunsets and having long, unhurried conversations.
Right, the story emphasizes that those conversations with neighbors were a staple of her evenings.
They were the main event.
It sounds idyllic, I admit, but I guess I'm still wondering how that translates to the actual mechanics of the brain.
Well, the narrative explicitly summarizes her experience by stating her life was simple, but it felt full and meaningful.
Full and meaningful.
Right. What's fascinating here is how the source frames the countryside. It isn't presenting it merely as a geographical location with fewer buildings.
It's more than just a spot on a map.
Exactly. It presents the countryside as a baseline state of mental calm. When your baseline environment is quiet and your social interactions are deeply rooted in daily familiarity, your cognitive load remains naturally low.
Okay, hold up. Can you give me it's like, I'm 5 on cognitive load.
Sure.
Are we talking about, like, how many tabs I have open in my brain's internet browser?
That is actually the perfect analogy. Imagine your brain as a web browser.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
In a highly stimulating environment, you have 50 tabs open, and they are all auto-playing videos.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It is. You are constantly scanning for threats, navigating complex crowds, filtering out sirens, and processing advertisements. That takes massive amounts of background processing power.
So your brain is just constantly humming, trying to keep up.
Yes, but in Lena's village, you only have 1 or 2 tabs open. You are just existing in a state of relative peace.
Because you know everyone and it's quiet.
Right. You don't need to devote brain power to filtering out the noise, which leaves you with a profound sense of mental bandwidth.
That browser tab analogy makes so much sense. And it really makes me want to pause and ask you, the listener, to take a second and reflect on your own baseline environment right now.
It's a great question to ask yourself.
It really is. Do you currently live somewhere that actually allows you to just walk slowly without feeling like you are in someone's way?
Or do you have a physical space where you can step outside and actually clear your mind?
Exactly. Or is your environment constantly demanding your attention and opening new tabs in your brain? It is such a vital thing to evaluate.
Because eventually that takes a toll.
It does. Because for Lena, as full and meaningful as that peaceful baseline was, it eventually wasn't enough to satisfy her ambitions.
She wanted more.
She did. As an adult, she realizes she needs more. Her catalyst for a massive life change is the pursuit of better career opportunities.
The classic driver for urbanization.
Right. So she takes a huge leap and she moves to a bustling big city.
Exactly. She completely upends her environment. She transitions from the slow, deliberate walk of the village to a landscape that is engineered from the ground up for speed, scale, and productivity.
And the honeymoon phase of that move is incredibly relatable. Who hasn't felt that rush of arriving in a new, vibrant place?
Oh, the energy is infectious at first.
Totally. The story captures her initial excitement beautifully. We get this enthusiastic flood of everything the city brings to her life.
All the new stimuli.
Yeah. She's suddenly surrounded by tall buildings, bright lights shining all through the night, and incredibly diverse groups of people filling up restaurants and cafes.
A total contrast to the village.
Night and day. She has endless things to explore right at her fingertips. Libraries, sprawling parks, massive museums. She is trying new foods, meeting people from completely different cultures.
And getting around quickly, too.
Yes. She's utilizing this fast public transport that makes it remarkably easy to zip across town in minutes. The story describes the city as a place that never seemed to sleep.
Everyone had somewhere to go.
And they were moving quickly to get there. Initially, she is absolutely intoxicated by the energy of it all. Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
The crash.
The crash, that honeymoon phase, it hits a wall hard.
It almost always does. Human psychology is adaptable, but we have our limits.
Hmm.
The narrative outlines a very distinct tipping point where Lena's lived experience shifts dramatically.
Things turn sour.
They do. She goes from feeling endlessly excited to feeling utterly exhausted. And it boils down to a single, highly relatable moment of reflection.
Paint the picture for us.
So Lena is sitting in her apartment after a long day of work. She looks out her window at the busy street below, and instead of feeling thrilled by the possibilities, she just hears the constant honking of cars.
The noise.
Exactly. She hears people talking loudly over the din of the traffic. She sees those exact same bright lights shining everywhere, but rather than feeling energized by them, she is suddenly just incredibly tired from the unrelenting fast pace.
It is a brilliant contrast. The very things that thrilled her when she first arrived, the lights, the movement, the constant activity,
Are now the exact things completely draining her battery.
yeah, they're draining her dry.
And that pivot in the description is very deliberate. The city's vibrant energy morphs into constant noise and crowded streets.
It's a total reframing of the same environment.
It is a textbook illustration of sensory overload. Remember those 50 auto-playing browser tabs we talked about?
How could I forget?
When your brain is constantly bombarded with high-intensity stimuli, the neon lights, the unpredictable noises, the rapid chaotic movement of thousands of strangers, it has to work in overdrive just to process that basic environmental information.
So it is not just that she is physically tired from working a job.
No,
Her brain is literally tired from just existing in that physical space.
precisely. Over time, that constant filtering depletes your cognitive reserves. It leads to that profound, bone-deep sense of tiredness Lena experiences while just staring out her window.
Wow.
This raises an important question for all of us, no matter where we live. How do we balance the very human desire for endless opportunity, career growth, and diverse experiences with the human brain's fundamental biological need for quiet and recovery?
That is the ultimate tug of war, the ambition pulling us toward the noise and the action, and our biology pulling us toward the quiet and the rest.
It's a really difficult balance to strike.
It really is. And Lena's response to this deep exhaustion is to seek out her roots. She decides she needs a break and takes a weekend visit back to her hometown.
She goes back to the village.
She does. And the description of her return is incredibly evocative. She arrives, and immediately she notices the roads feel quiet again. The air physically feels cleaner in her lungs.
It's a total reset.
Yeah, and my absolute favorite detail from the entire story, she looks up and notices that the sky looked wider.
Oh, the sky looked wider is such a fantastic observation.
It's so poetic, isn't it?
It is, because yes, it's a literal physical reality. When you leave a dense city full of skyscrapers, the horizon opens up. But it also serves as a perfect metaphor for the mental space she is suddenly reclaiming. The crushing pressure of the city is gone, and her perspective is literally and figuratively opening back up.
I love that. Her mind has room to breathe again. And this sets the scene for a really crucial moment in the narrative.
With the scene on the porch.
Exactly. Lena is sitting outside on her porch with a cup of tea, just soaking in this wider sky and the familiar, quiet surroundings.
Taking it all in.
Yeah, she is greeting people she has known for years as they walk by slowly. And then she sits down and begins reading. Now, keeping in mind that this is a story for language learners, she pulls out one of the books she uses to practice.
Right, the practical layer comes back in here.
It does. The book she grabs is called Short Stories in English for Beginners, and it's specifically the Teach Yourself edition.
Good choice for a relaxed afternoon.
Definitely. She enjoys reading these stories because it helps her practice the language in a relaxed, low-pressure way.
And this moment on the porch is where the narrative brilliantly connects physical environment to cognitive function.
This is the turning point.
It really is. The story highlights a massive aha moment for Lena. Sitting there in the peaceful countryside with her tea and her book, she realizes that it is remarkably easier to focus.
Her brain isn't fighting the environment.
Exactly. Her mind feels crystal clear. That reduction in sensory overload we just discussed, closing all those noisy browser tabs, directly translates into immediate cognitive clarity.
She is not fighting off 100 different distractions just to read a single paragraph.
Right.
And because she is feeling this clarity, she actually picks up a second book she brought with her.
What's that one called?
This one is called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
That's the title.
It is a mouthful. But the realization she has while reading this one is huge. She discovers that in this calm environment, she can learn complex grammar naturally.
Naturally, that's the key word.
Yeah, she isn't clenching her jaw or feeling like she's studying too hard.
That is the magic of a low-stress environment. The lack of external pressure allows her brain to absorb and synthesize complex information almost effortlessly.
It just flows in.
It feels natural because her cognitive resources are entirely dedicated to the task at hand, rather than scanning the environment for stressors.
Right. So at this point in the story, you might think the moral is simply the countryside is the best place to learn. End of story.
But it's not quite that simple, is it?
No. There is a fantastic twist on this whole idea of environment versus learning. While she's having this revelation on the porch, Lena remembers a lesson from a third book she often uses.
Okay.
It is called Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. And the core philosophy she recalls from this third book completely shifts her perspective on everything she has just experienced.
It really does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the narrative delivers its ultimate, most powerful lesson on personal growth.
Hit me with it.
The philosophy of that book reveals that language learning, and honestly, we can extend this to any form of skill acquisition or self-improvement, works best when it becomes a seamless, integrated part of your daily life,
Okay.
no matter where you live. The lesson is that you can practice effectively in the busy city, and you can practice effectively in the quiet countryside.
The location isn't the silver bullet.
Exactly. Yes, a peaceful environment certainly facilitates focus, as Lena just experienced with her perfectly clear mind in the village. But the true, undeniable driver of success isn't where you sit. It is consistency.
Consistency is the absolute magic word here. It is such a relief to hear, honestly.
It takes the pressure off.
It really does.
Yeah.
It means you don't have to quit your job and escape to a secluded mountaintop cabin every single time you need to learn a new skill or improve yourself.
You don't have to run away to grow.
Right. It is about integrating the habit of learning into whatever reality you are currently living in. Which brings us to a really beautiful, quiet moment of reflection toward the end of the narrative.
The sunset scene.
Yeah. Lena is watching the sunset over the fields of her hometown, and she starts deeply evaluating both of these worlds she has inhabited.
Weighing them against each other.
Exactly. The story outlines some very stark, clear distinctions between them. The city is the undeniable engine of opportunity, diversity, and thrilling excitement.
And the country.
The countryside is the ultimate sanctuary of peace, nature, and mental simplicity. She has lived in both. She has acutely felt the benefits and the exhausting drawbacks of both. So what does this all mean?
The core insight of this story, and truly the philosophical thesis of the entire piece, is Lena's realization that happiness doesn't come from choosing only one lifestyle.
That's a powerful statement.
It is incredibly clever how the narrative structures this.
Mhm.
You have to remember the original audience. This is a tool designed to teach English learners how to compare and contrast.
Oh, right. It's a functional text.
Exactly. It explicitly trains them to debate extremes. It provides the vocabulary to weigh noise versus quiet, busy streets versus peaceful nature, and a fast lifestyle versus a slow lifestyle.
Right. It literally gives them the exact phrasing to pick a side, like teaching them to say, personally, I prefer city life because, or, in my opinion, the countryside is better because.
Setting them up to choose.
It is setting up a strict binary.
Precisely. It trains the learner to argue the binary perfectly. But then, after doing all that setup, the narrative transcends its own lesson.
How so?
It concludes that the most enlightened perspective doesn't come from winning the debate for one side. It comes from experiencing and valuing both sides.
Recognizing the good in both.
Yes, it teaches you how to argue for the city or the country, but reveals that the wisest path is recognizing the unique, irreplaceable value in each environment.
That makes a lot of sense.
You do not have to permanently reject the city's ambition to deeply appreciate the country's peace. And conversely, you don't have to hate the country's slow pace to thrive in the city's vibrant energy.
That is such a liberating takeaway. We do not have to lock ourselves into a single rigid identity of being just a city person or a country person.
We can be adaptable.
Exactly. To summarize this incredible journey we have been on today, we followed Lena from a quiet, nature-filled village where people walked slowly and neighbors always had time to say hello.
The baseline of calm.
We watched her chase ambition to a bustling, sleepless city filled with bright lights, endless career opportunities, and diverse crowds.
The engine of growth.
We saw her absolutely thrill at the city's energy, only to eventually feel the crushing weight of its constant noise and sensory overload.
And then the return.
We followed her back home, returning to the wider skies and cleaner air to find deep cognitive clarity and focus with her books on the porch.
A great full circle.
It really was, but most importantly, we learned alongside her that while our physical surroundings absolutely dictate our daily energy levels, it is our unyielding consistency that actually shapes our long-term growth.
And that is exactly the message I want to emphasize for you listening right now.
The main takeaway.
The final lesson of this story is profoundly relevant to all of us, regardless of our current zip code. What matters most is how we choose to live, how we commit to growing, and how we continue learning.
I couldn't agree more.
Every single one of us has to navigate the noisy, chaotic cities and the quiet, solitary countrysides of our own lives, sometimes literally and sometimes metaphorically in our careers and relationships.
That's a great point. It can be totally metaphorical.
The goal isn't to frantically search for a perfect, flawless utopia and hide there forever. The goal is to consciously draw the best elements from whatever world you find yourself standing in today.
Be present where you are.
Exactly. If you are currently in a season of hustle, bright lights, and demanding schedules, soak up that diversity and seize the opportunities. If you are in a season of quiet, slow walks, and fewer demands, use that precious mental space to focus, read, and learn naturally.
I absolutely love that perspective. Use the environment you currently have to build the consistency you desperately need.
Well said.
It makes me think about one final, slightly provocative idea that builds on everything we've explored today.
Oh, let's hear it.
Well, Lena had to physically pack her bags and move between the city and the country to experience both the fast-paced opportunity and the quiet peace.
She had to physically travel, right?
Right. But as our world becomes increasingly connected digitally, allowing us to access those intense city career opportunities right from our quiet country porches through a laptop screen.
Ah, I see where you're going.
Will the physical divide between these lifestyles eventually disappear entirely? Will it simply be left up to us to build our own mental cities for when we need to work, and our own mental villages for when we need to rest, no matter where we physically sit?
That is a fascinating thought.
Something for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Lena's journey and the hidden psychology of where we choose to live. Keep learning, keep growing, and we will catch you next time. You know that feeling when the alarm clock goes off and, before your feet even hit the bedroom floor, your brain is already running through the exact same script as yesterday?
Oh, absolutely. The dreaded morning loop.
Right. You wake up, you make the coffee, you commute, work, scroll through your phone, go to sleep, and then you just hit repeat.
And it's a perfectly fine routine.
Exactly. It's perfectly normal. But somewhere in the middle of it, you catch yourself staring out a window or maybe looking at your ceiling at night, just wondering, is this it? Is this all there is?
It's that quiet, creeping dread.
Yeah, that existential dread on a random Tuesday afternoon. If you are nodding your head right now, or if you've ever felt that way, you are absolutely in the right place. Welcome to this deep dive.
We have a really fascinating source today.
We do. Today, we're analyzing this incredibly thought-provoking and honestly emotionally resonant story from the Easy English podcast. It's titled Feeling Lost in Life.
And it tackles this very modern, very quiet kind of crisis, doesn't it?
It really does. The mission for our deep dive today is to unpack this story of a man named Noah. We're going to look closely at the behavioral science and the psychology of feeling stuck in that loop.
Which is something so many of us experience.
Right. And, more importantly, we are going to extract the surprising, incredibly simple antidote to information overload and that feeling of just being completely adrift in your own life. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's start with Noah. The narrative paints this vivid picture of his daily routine, and frankly, it is uncomfortably relatable.
Extremely relatable.
Every morning, Noah wakes up at the exact same time. He preps his coffee, checks his phone, gets ready for work. Then it's work, lunch, emails, more work.
A standard Tuesday.
Exactly. He comes home, eats dinner, scrolls through social media, goes to bed, and the whole thing starts over. But the author gives us one crucial defining detail about Noah's situation.
That nothing terrible is actually happening.
Yes, the text explicitly notes that nothing terrible is happening in his life, yet he feels completely empty.
What's fascinating here is the specific question Noah starts asking himself. As he sits there on his couch, endlessly scrolling online, he's watching other people achieving these massive, highly visible goals.
Oh, the social media highlight reel.
Exactly. He sees people traveling the globe, launching businesses, building exciting careers, learning entirely new skills. And looking at all that, he asks himself, what am I doing with my life?
It's brutal.
It is the textbook definition of the comparison trap, but amplified by the digital age.
Because it's right in your pocket.
Right. The narrative perfectly captures that deeply isolating illusion that everyone else has a map and a destination while you are completely stagnant.
Like you're stuck in mud.
You feel like you are standing perfectly still on a treadmill while the rest of the world is sprinting forward.
It's that highly specific modern whiplash. You're sitting there just trying to clear out your spam folder, and meanwhile, someone on your feed is supposedly launching a tech startup from a beach in Bali.
Which is probably exaggerated anyway.
Of course it is, but it makes the mundane act of just managing your inbox feel like this profound personal defeat. And the fact that nothing terrible is happening to Noah almost makes his psychological state worse, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because society tells you that you don't even have a valid reason to be unhappy. You have a job, you have food, a roof. It's just this perfectly fine, incredibly hollow routine.
That is exactly the trap of the perfectly fine.
The perfectly fine trap.
Right. When things are disastrous, when you lose a job or face a major life crisis, you are forced to make a change.
You have to react.
Your baseline survival instinct kicks in and forces adaptation. But when things are just okay, when your environment is merely comfortable but completely unfulfilling, there is no immediate catalyst for change.
So you just float.
Exactly. If your boat is sinking, you bail water. But if your boat is just sitting perfectly still in the doldrums with no wind in the sails, you just slowly go mad.
That is such a good way to put it.
You can easily spend years in that loop, functioning, doing exactly what is expected of you, but feeling entirely disconnected from any sense of meaning or forward momentum.
That invisible cage.
That is the invisible cage Noah is trapped in.
Which brings us to the turning point of this story. And it plays out in this really beautifully understated scene. One evening, Noah just decides he needs to break the physical loop.
Just physically getting out of the apartment.
Right. He gets out and goes for a walk. The air is cool, the city is quiet, and he ends up in a small, empty park. And there, sitting peacefully on a bench watching the sunset, is an older man.
A classic archetype, but so effective here.
It really works. Noah sits down on the other end of the bench. They just sit there in shared silence for a few minutes before the older man smiles and simply asks, "Long day."
The anonymity of that moment is crucial.
Because they don't know each other at all.
Right. Noah laughs softly and admits, yes, but honestly, it feels like every day is the same. Because this man is a stranger, Noah doesn't have to put up the facade he likely wears at work or with his friends.
He can just drop the mask.
He just opens up and confesses that he doesn't know where his life is going. He tells this older man, "Sometimes I feel like I'm just passing time."
Just passing time. Man, that is a heavy phrase.
It really is.
It implies a waiting room mentality. You know, you're just sitting in the waiting room of your own life, assuming that eventually someone is going to call your name and tell you what your purpose is.
Precisely. It strips away the illusion of agency. But the older man listens carefully, and then he delivers this profound observation.
What does he say?
He says, most people feel lost at some point in their lives. Feeling lost is not failure. It's often the beginning of searching.
I hear that. I do.
Yeah.
But let's push back on it for a second.
Let's just hear it.
Saying feeling lost is not failure is a beautifully comforting thought. But if you just sit on a park bench, accepting that you're lost indefinitely, that comfort can quickly curdle into apathy.
That's a very real danger.
Right. Lingering in that state for too long without a tether is exactly how people slip into clinical depression. So how does the narrative navigate that risk? Does it just advocate for accepting the dread?
That is a critical distinction, and no, the story doesn't let Noah just wallow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the older man isn't telling Noah to set up camp in his confusion.
Okay.
He frames feeling lost as a developmental milestone. He explains that when you feel lost, it usually means your mind is ready to grow.
Ready to grow.
Yes. You have outgrown your current environment, and your brain is starting to ask deeper questions that your current routine can no longer answer.
So the discomfort is a signal.
The discomfort isn't a disease. It is the friction of outgrowing your current container. The older man points to the sunset and tells Noah that clarity rarely comes all at once in some blinding flash of insight. It comes slowly.
He actually provides a surprisingly practical formula for someone just sitting on a park bench. He says clarity comes through learning, reflection, and small actions.
Small actions being the key.
Right. It's not about waiting for a lightning bolt of inspiration to strike while you're scrolling on the couch. It's a slow burn. And as Noah absorbs this, the text notes a shift.
An internal shift.
Yeah. For the first time in a long while, he feels hopeful. The pressure is off. He realizes he doesn't need to have a grand master plan drawn up by tomorrow morning.
Hope is the initial spark, but the narrative is smart enough to know that hope without execution fades right back into the baseline routine by the next morning.
It just evaporates.
Exactly. The brilliance of what happens next lies entirely in the scale of the action Noah chooses to take. He doesn't attempt a massive life overhaul, which is where most of us fail.
This is arguably the most important mechanical takeaway from the entire piece. The next day, Noah decides to make a change, but it is a micro shift.
Very micro.
He doesn't march into his boss's office and dramatically quit his job. He doesn't book a one-way ticket to an ashram. He simply targets one specific vulnerability in his routine.
His evening scrolling.
Yes. Instead of spending his entire evening passively scrolling on his phone, he picks up a book he'd previously bought but never opened.
And what was the book?
It's a collection called Short Stories in English for Beginners from Teach Yourself. Just simple, accessible stories.
We learn that Noah has always harbored this background goal of improving his English.
Yeah.
But he never actually allocated time or energy to it.
It was just a someday goal.
It was a lingering item on his mental to-do list. But that night, he sits down and reads one story. Just one. And the psychological genius of this specific choice is rooted entirely in friction reduction.
That seems almost too minor to matter, though.
How so?
Well, when you're dealing with deep existential dread, reading a single beginner's storybook feels like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
I can see why you'd say that.
Does a step that small actually generate enough momentum to break somebody out of a rut? Why not sign up for an intensive, immersive language course if he really wants to change his life?
Because drastic overhauls require massive activation energy, which a person experiencing burnout or existential dread simply doesn't have.
They're already depleted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If Noah had enrolled in an intensive, demanding academic course, his cognitive load would have spiked. He likely would have felt overwhelmed, experienced failure, and retreated right back to the safety of his phone screen.
Which would just reinforce his belief that he's stuck.
Right. By choosing a simple, enjoyable story, he completely removed the friction of starting. The barrier to entry was practically zero.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the text specifically notes the result. For the first time in weeks, Noah felt the sensation of learning something. He gave his brain a microdose of neuroplasticity.
He actually felt his brain engaging rather than just acting as a passive receptacle for digital content.
It's an active process instead of a passive one.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that one tiny, incredibly low-stakes action starts to create a compounding effect.
A snowball effect.
Yes. A few days later, Noah's behavior naturally evolves. He finds another book. This time, it's Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Notice the organic progression there.
He didn't force it.
He didn't plan a curriculum. He started with the easiest possible task to build the habit and secure a quick psychological win.
The single short story.
Right. Once that foundation of confidence was laid, he naturally sought out something slightly more structured. But the author emphasizes that this second book teaches in a natural way.
It's still stories.
Noah is still engaged in narrative. He is still prioritizing the enjoyment of the process over the rigor of the outcome.
He just begins reading a little bit every single evening.
Okay.
And this is where we see the critical emotional shift in the text. His evenings begin to feel tangibly more meaningful.
Because he's participating in his own life again.
Yes. The story points out that instead of feeling lost, he feels curious. We talk a lot about finding your passion or finding your purpose, but curiosity is vastly underrated as a tool for getting unstuck.
Curiosity is, mechanically speaking, the ultimate antidote to feeling stuck.
Break that down for us.
Think about the architecture of dread or anxiety. Your focus is entirely inward. You are trapped in an echo chamber in your own mind, agonizing over your lack of direction or your uncertain future.
Spiraling.
Yes, spiraling. Curiosity forcibly redirects your attention outward. You are no longer asking, what is fundamentally wrong with my life?
You're asking about the task.
You're asking, what does this new vocabulary word mean? Or how does this specific story resolve? It grounds you in the immediate present and fundamentally changes your relationship with the task at hand.
It pulls you right out of the macro-level paralysis.
Yeah.
You can't be terrified of your 5-year trajectory if you're genuinely engrossed in the paragraph right in front of you.
Exactly. You are entirely present.
And this quiet momentum just keeps building. One weekend, Noah's reading online about language acquisition, and he discovers a methodology focused on effortless, native-style listening.
He discovers the book Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. This brings us to a core revelation in Noah's journey. The methodology he uncovers explains a concept that completely surprises him.
That learning does not have to feel stressful.
Yes, learning does not have to feel stressful.
It's fascinating because that challenges the entire no pain, no gain cultural myth we all swim in. We are so conditioned to believe that growth requires suffering.
This raises an important question for you listening right now. How often do we actively sabotage our own goals because we artificially inflate the stress of the process?
We make it harder than it needs to be.
We assume that if we aren't grinding, if a process isn't grueling, then it isn't yielding valid results.
If you're not sweating, it doesn't count.
Right. How many times have you decided to learn a skill, get fit, or start a new project, and immediately drafted a rigid, punishing schedule that you inevitably abandoned within a week?
Oh, New Year's resolutions are built on that exact trap.
Exactly. The natural language methodology Noah discovers, learning through ambient listening, repetition, and low-stress daily exposure, mimics how we acquire our native languages as toddlers.
Toddlers aren't stressed about grammar drills.
No, they just absorb it. It doesn't rely on massive reserves of willpower. It relies on consistency.
It's the difference between trying to push a massive boulder up a steep hill versus just letting a snowball roll down one.
Yeah.
He let the natural process of daily, low-stakes learning carry him forward.
Which is so much more sustainable.
But, and I think this is where the story truly earns its emotional weight. The author doesn't hand us a fake cinematic ending.
No overnight transformations here.
No, it's deeply grounded in reality. The text says, weeks pass, Noah's life does not become perfect. He still has to wake up when his alarm goes off. He still has to commute. He still has entirely ordinary, frustrating days at work.
Which is the honest reality of progress.
It doesn't fix everything.
The external, physical circumstances of Noah's life haven't dramatically transformed. He hasn't suddenly become a digital nomad or a billionaire CEO like the avatars he was envying on social media.
He's still Noah.
He's still Noah.
Yeah.
But the internal landscape, the lens through which he experiences his daily life, has completely shifted.
That's the real victory.
He no longer feels adrift. He has reclaimed a sense of agency. He feels he is moving forward, even if the absolute distance covered each day is minuscule.
So what does this all mean? The narrative includes a thematic summary at the end, and it distills this transition perfectly.
What does it say?
It reminds us that periods of confusion and questioning are unavoidable. But feeling lost is not the end of your story. It is the exact diagnostic indicator that you are ready to begin a new chapter of growth.
The central thesis here is that action, no matter how small, precedes clarity.
Action precedes clarity. I love that.
Reading one single page, learning one single word. Swapping out 20 minutes of screen time for 20 minutes of focused attention.
Just breaking the loop.
It is the steady accumulation of these tiny moments of reclaimed agency that eventually constructs a meaningful direction. You do not build a new life with one reckless giant leap. You build it brick by tiny brick, relying on systems rather than sheer motivation.
Which brings us to the final thoughts from Noah's journey and a direct message to you.
To the listener.
Yes. If you are feeling lost in your life right now, whether that's in your career, in your relationships, or just in the gray monotony of your daily routine, remember this. You do not need to have all the answers mapped out today.
You really don't.
You don't need a flawless 5-year plan to justify your existence. You only need to identify one ridiculously small step forward, lower the barrier to entry, learn something new without the pressure of mastering it.
Just engage with it.
Improve your system a tiny bit today and trust that the clarity you are desperately looking for is a byproduct of that motion.
I'd like to leave you with a thought that builds on the older man's wisdom on that park bench.
Please do.
If feeling lost is truly just your mind's way of signaling that it has reached capacity and is ready to grow, what if the moments of deepest, most uncomfortable confusion in your life aren't signs that you've wandered off your path?
What if they're not mistakes?
What if they are the exact moments you are finally outgrowing a comfortable but limiting environment, and your brain is simply demanding that you construct a new one tiny habit at a time?
That reframing changes everything. The confusion isn't a mistake, it's the invitation. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Take that invitation today, find your one small step, lower the friction, learn one new thing, and keep growing. We'll catch you next time.
Have you ever sat in a meeting, like a really high-stakes one, and you have this absolutely brilliant idea, but you just stay totally silent?
Oh, completely. Just sitting there, completely frozen.
Right. You stay silent out of fear, and then, 5 minutes later, someone else says the exact same thing.
And they get all the credit for it. It's a uniquely agonizing experience.
It really is. You're just left stewing in this toxic mix of, like, frustration and resentment, mostly at yourself.
Yeah, your heart is pounding. You've been overanalyzing the phrasing in your head for 10 minutes, and suddenly you're nodding along to your own idea coming out of a colleague's mouth.
Exactly. Well, if you, meaning you, the listener, have ever been in that exact situation, you are in the right place for today's deep dive, because we are digging into some incredibly revealing notes and excerpts from a piece called The Architecture of Confidence.
Which is such a great title, by the way.
It is. And our mission today is to, completely deconstruct the mechanics of confidence. We want to take this concept that so many of us treat as this mystical, genetic trait like, being double-jointed or having green eyes.
Like you're just born with it or you aren't.
Exactly. We want to shift it from that to a highly practical, step-by-step skill that anyone can build from scratch, like a muscle.
And that shift in perspective is the necessary starting point, because that paralysis you just described in the meeting room, that is a universal human experience.
Oh, absolutely.
But the framework we're unpacking today, it provides this meticulous psychological blueprint for dismantling that paralysis. It drags us away from empty platitudes like, just believe in yourself.
Hate that one. Just be confident. Like, oh, wow, why didn't I think of that?
Right. It's completely useless advice. Instead, this source forces us to look at the actual neurological and behavioral levers you can pull to change how you operate in those high-stakes environments.
So let's ground this in the real world. To illustrate how his architecture works, the notes introduce us to a protagonist. His name is Ethan.
Ethan is, he's basically the archetype for the incredibly competent yet chronically invisible professional.
Yes, you know this person. Honestly, you might be this person. Ethan is diligent. He's analytical. He processes complex problems faster than almost anyone else in his department.
So his baseline competence is completely locked in. He isn't suffering from an intellectual deficit at all.
Not even a little. His fatal flaw is an execution deficit.
Yeah.
And it's specifically driven by a lack of confidence.
Yeah, the notes detail his default behavior. During these critical strategy sessions, he essentially, he unplugs his own microphone.
Even when he holds the exact piece of data the group is desperately searching for, he just freezes.
And we really need to look at the why here, because it's not just that he's shy. When you look at his internal monologue, it is a masterclass in catastrophic thinking.
Oh, it's brutal. He's consumed by this assumption that if he opens his mouth, his idea won't be perfectly formed. He's terrified of the social judgment of his peers.
Exactly. So his brain defaults to its most basic survival mechanism, which is camouflage. He literally tries to become invisible.
Which, ironically, leads directly to that agonizing scenario we just talked about, watching someone else capitalize on his unspoken brilliance.
Let's actually look at the mechanism of that camouflage for a second. When Ethan sits in that room, his amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is firing exactly as if he were being stalked by a predator.
Really? Like a physical predator?
Yes. The brain struggles to differentiate between the physical threat of, say, a tiger and the social threat of looking foolish in front of a vice president.
Wow. So the fight or flight response just completely takes over.
It kicks in hard. Blood flow actually redirects away from the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, articulate part of his brain.
So he's physically paralyzing his own intellect to avoid what he perceives as social death.
Precisely. But the tragedy is, he views his inability to speak as a permanent character flaw, rather than, a temporary biological hijack.
That is such a vital distinction. He just thinks he's broken. But then, the framework introduces a foil to Ethan, a colleague named Laura.
Laura is fascinating.
She really is. She completely shatters his flawed definition of what confidence even looks like. And this is a massive paradigm shift, because culturally, we have this deeply ingrained stereotype that confidence equals volume.
Oh, for sure. We think the confident person is the loud, dominant, table-pounding extrovert who just sucks all the oxygen out of the room.
The quintessential alpha business stereotype.
Exactly. But Laura is the complete antithesis of that. The source specifically notes that she is not loud, she doesn't interrupt people, she doesn't posture.
Right, she operates with this incredibly potent, calm clarity. She asks these highly targeted questions. And when she speaks, the room leans in.
Not because she's overpowering them, but because her signal-to-noise ratio is just so good.
Yes, she proves that true, sustainable confidence is about clarity and conviction, not decibels.
And watching Laura operate is the pivot point for Ethan, because once he recognizes that he doesn't need a personality transplant to be confident-like, he doesn't need to morph into a charismatic extrovert. The barrier to entry suddenly drops.
It becomes attainable. He realizes that whatever Laura is doing, it's a tactical approach, not some genetic advantage.
So he finally gathers the nerve to just ask her. He asks her how she does it. How is she so immune to the fear that paralyzes him?
Which leads to Laura dropping what I consider really the central thesis of this entire deep dive. She tells him, I wasn't always confident. It didn't happen overnight.
And she dismantles the biggest illusion of all. She admits that she still gets nervous.
That blew my mind. That is the crux of the whole architecture, isn't it?
It is. Most people look at someone speaking with Laura's level of poise, and they assume she's experiencing zero internal anxiety. They assume confidence is the complete absence of fear.
But Laura defines confidence as the active, conscious decision to execute the action even when you feel the fear.
Right. Acting in the presence of fear.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit, because it's so easy to say, just act despite the fear. That sounds great on a, motivational poster.
Sure.
But when your amygdala is literally screaming at you, as you just explained with the tiger analogy, how do you actually bypass that biological hijack? You can't just willpower your way out of a physiological response.
You're entirely correct. Brute forcing it simply doesn't work, which is exactly why Laura doesn't tell Ethan to just be braver.
Right. She gives him a system.
She hands him a highly calculated 3-step blueprint for what we might call micro-courage. It's a behavioral workaround. And step 1 is to shrink the arena.
Shrink the arena. Tell me more about that.
She tells him to start speaking in the smallest, lowest stakes situations possible. Don't volunteer to run the quarterly review right out of the gate.
That would be a disaster.
Exactly. Just ask one simple clarifying question during a routine team sync.
I love this. It's like chemical titration. You don't mix the whole vat of highly reactive chemicals at once and blow up the lab.
No, you do not.
You add one single drop to see what happens.
That is a perfect analogy. By shrinking the size of the action, you are effectively flying under the radar of your own amygdala.
Oh, wow. So you're tricking your brain.
Basically, yeah. Asking one small question doesn't trigger the catastrophic fight or flight alarm because the perceived social risk is incredibly low. You're exposing yourself to the stressor in a dose that your nervous system can actually metabolize.
That makes total sense. Now, Laura's second step is where things get a bit thorny for me. Her second habit is accept mistakes.
Right.
The rationale being that once you stop demanding perfection, the friction to speak disappears. But let's be realistic here. You and I both know that in high-stakes corporate environments, mistakes absolutely have consequences.
They do.
You can lose an account. You can lose credibility. If Ethan just starts accepting mistakes, isn't he risking his reputation? Like, how does he adopt this mindset without just becoming genuinely careless?
That is a critical pushback, and the distinction lies in what exactly Ethan is making a mistake about. Laura isn't advocating for negligent, sloppy work.
Okay.
She's targeting the fear of conversational imperfection. Ethan stays silent because he demands that his thoughts be flawlessly articulated before they ever leave his mouth.
He wants the final, polished draft of an idea immediately.
Exactly. What Laura's teaching him is that a meeting is a drafting process. The mistake isn't a massive error in financial judgment. The mistake is stumbling over a word or suggesting an idea that gets politely shot down.
Oh, I see. By accepting that minor social friction is just a normal part of collaboration, he removes the catastrophic pressure.
Right. It's not about accepting incompetence. It's about giving yourself permission to iterate out loud.
You don't have to be the oracle delivering a flawless prophecy. You're just a guy adding a piece to the puzzle.
That's a great way to put it. And that flows perfectly into Laura's third step, which acts as a sort of safety net. Prepare your thoughts before important conversations.
Prepare your thoughts.
She notes that when her ideas are structurally organized in advance, the delivery takes care of itself.
But wait, if I'm meticulously preparing all my thoughts to lower my anxiety, aren't I just creating a rigid script?
And scripts are dangerous.
Very. Because if the meeting goes off topic and I lose my place in that script, won't my working memory just crash and leave me panicking even more?
That's exactly why you shouldn't prepare a script. A script is fragile. Laura's talking about building scaffolding.
Scaffolding.
Yeah. A script dictates exactly what you will say word for word. Scaffolding is just identifying your core premise and maybe, two supporting data points.
Got it.
So when the anxiety inevitably hits and your working memory starts to narrow, you don't have to rely on spontaneous brilliance. You simply lean back on the structural pillars you've already built.
So Ethan actually takes this 3-step blueprint, shrink the arena, allow for iteration, build the scaffolding, and he runs a real-world trial.
He does.
The very next day, he decides to deploy this micro-courage. He raises his hand to ask a highly specific, simple question. And the notes from the source are very honest here. His voice shakes a little.
Which is important to highlight. The fear hasn't magically evaporated.
Not at all. But the critical outcome is that the sky does not fall. He doesn't get last out of the room. In fact, his manager pauses and genuinely thanks him.
Because Ethan's question happened to clarify a massive ambiguity for the entire team.
Right. And that moment is neurologically profound for Ethan. It creates this positive feedback loop. For years, his brain predicted that speaking up would result in social death.
And he finally ran an experiment, and reality delivered a total different result. He proved his own threat detection system wrong.
But as great as that victory is, it's just one meeting. If he wants to turn this into a permanent trait, he has to go deeper.
He does. The external tactics are great. The scaffolding, the small questions, they get you in the door.
But to stay in the room, he has to deal with the psychological rot underneath. He has to address why he fundamentally believed his voice didn't matter in the first place.
Which brings us to the next phase of his evolution. Ethan starts listening to an audiobook during his commute. It's called Confidence: How to Overcome Your Limiting Beliefs and Achieve Your Goals.
Now, limiting beliefs. We hear that term thrown around in pop psychology so often that it's almost lost its meaning.
Right. It feels like something you'd read on a wellness influencer's Instagram post.
It can sound very fluffy, like just let go of your limiting beliefs.
It really can. But the notes extract a highly clinical architectural view of this concept from the audiobook. The source outlines the greatest hits of limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. People will judge me. My ideas are derivative.
Yeah, the classics.
Ethan has been operating under the assumption that these thoughts were empirical facts. But the breakthrough is realizing that limiting beliefs are absolutely not facts.
They aren't.
No, they are simply habits of thinking.
Habits of thinking. Let's pause on that. I love that phrasing so much. I want to try an analogy here.
Go for it.
Let's say you're standing at the edge of a dense, overgrown forest, right?
Yeah.
And you need to get to the other side. Over the years, you've walked the exact same path through the trees every single day.
Okay.
That path represents the thought, my ideas are stupid. And because you've walked it thousands of times, the dirt is packed down, the brush is cleared out, it is the path of absolute least resistance.
Right.
So when you get stressed in a meeting, your brain automatically sprints down that paved highway.
That is exactly how neuroplasticity works. It's Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Oh, right. I've heard of that.
Your brain optimizes for efficiency. It wraps those frequently used neural pathways in myelin.
Myelin.
Yeah, it acts like insulation on a copper wire, making the signal travel even faster. So the thought, I am going to sound foolish, literally travels through Ethan's brain faster than the thought, I have a valid point to make.
Wow. So if these beliefs are just heavily trafficked dirt paths in the brain, it means we can't just delete them by looking in a mirror and saying positive affirmations.
Ultimately not.
You can't just stand at the edge of the forest and wish the path away.
No, you cannot think your way out of a limiting belief. That is the trap of so much self-help material. You actually have to pick up a machete and start bushwhacking a brand new trail through the thorns.
Ouch, that sounds difficult.
It is. You have to force a new behavioral pathway. The first time you walk the new path saying, I'm going to share this idea anyway, it is exhausting, it's painful, and it's clumsy.
But if you walk it every day?
Eventually, the new path gets packed down. And over time, because you stop using the old path of silence, the brush simply overgrows it.
That is incredibly empowering. It means confidence is ultimately just behavioral activation. It's getting your reps in at the gym. And that perfectly frames the final phase of Ethan's journey, which the notes describe as the snowball effect of practice. Once he realizes his fear is just an overgrown neural pathway, he stops taking it so seriously.
He starts aggressively bushwhacking that new trail.
And the source details a very deliberate escalation. Progressive overload.
Yeah, we see him move beyond the micro-courage of a single question. He graduates to offering short, unprompted ideas. Then he begins initiating complex strategy discussions one-on-one with colleagues.
Building up the muscle.
And finally, the ultimate test. He volunteers to stand up and present a project to the entire division. He is systematically exposing himself to higher and higher levels of perceived risk.
I want to inject a massive reality check here because I don't want anyone listening to think there's a magical inflection point where this suddenly feels like a warm bath.
Oh, no, it doesn't.
The notes explicitly state that every time he scales up to a new level, the discomfort returns. When he goes from asking a question to presenting a project, his heart rate spikes all over again. The fear does not vanish just because you understand the neuroscience.
That is essential to remember. You are still a human being exposing yourself to social vulnerability. But what does change is his relationship to the discomfort.
The friction decreases with every repetition.
Yes.
Yeah.
The panic is no longer a stop sign. It just becomes background noise. He's built a tolerance to the adrenaline.
And what happens when you build that tolerance? Let's look at Ethan's end state. Because he endured that friction, the entire dynamic of his professional life completely inverts.
It really does.
Instead of hiding, he is now the person colleagues actively seek out for insights. His ideas are actually put into production to solve major company problems.
And on a purely physical level, the source notes something really interesting.
What's that?
His voice stops shaking. The resonance of his actual voice becomes stronger because his nervous system has finally accepted that it is safe to be heard.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
If we pull back and look at the entirety of Ethan's timeline, it proves the core thesis we set out to explore today.
That confidence is absolutely not a gift bestowed upon a lucky few at birth.
No. It is a highly trainable, mechanical skill built through systematic exposure to discomfort. Ethan completely transformed his reality, not by waiting until he miraculously felt brave, but by acting bravely while he was still terrified.
He rewired his own brain through action.
I want you, listening right now, to really visualize that timeline. Picture Ethan looking back at his former, silent self, the guy who literally watched his own brilliant ideas get stolen because he was paralyzed by the illusion of fear.
It's a stark contrast.
The only difference between silent Ethan and confident Ethan wasn't a magic spell. It wasn't a sudden influx of charisma. It was literally just a series of tiny, uncomfortable choices that compounded over time.
He chose to ask one small question.
Right. Then he chose to tolerate the fear of sharing one short idea. He just kept walking down the new uncomfortable path until it became his default reality.
It is the ultimate demystification of human confidence. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be fearless. You simply need to be willing to take the next small, uncomfortable step.
So as we synthesize everything we've extracted from the architecture of confidence, the grand takeaway is this. Confidence is a choice of action, not a baseline emotion.
If you are sitting around waiting for the fear to go away before you finally speak up, you are going to be waiting for the rest of your life.
You really are. You have to treat your self-doubt as nothing more than a bad habit of thinking. Shrink the arena so your brain doesn't panic. Build your structural scaffolding, and just iterate out loud.
The fear will always be in the passenger seat. The goal is simply to stop letting it grab the steering wheel.
I love that, exactly. Now, we spent this entire deep dive looking at how Ethan applied this exact neurological framework to his career, his workplace meetings, and his professional growth. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on today.
Let's hear it.
We've established that confidence is just the habit of taking microactions despite fear. So, what happens if you apply this exact same blueprint to your personal life?
Oh, taking it out of the boardroom.
Exactly. What is the one small, terrifying question you have been avoiding in your relationships? What is the one microaction you've been too paralyzed to take regarding your most deeply held personal goal? If you know the fear is just a biological illusion, what does dipping your toe into that specific discomfort look like for you today?
That's a powerful question to walk away with.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning those limiting beliefs, keep stepping into the friction, and we will catch you next time. So what if the reason you can't focus at like 3:30 p.m. on a Tuesday isn't actually because you're working too hard, but because of a tiny, seemingly harmless decision you made I don't know, 30 seconds after opening your eyes this morning.
Right. Yeah. It completely reframes how we think about burnout. I mean, we usually blame the sheer volume of our workload or the endless meetings or that inbox that just never empties
Oh,
out.
for sure. The inbox is brutal.
It is. But the underlying architecture of that exhaustion, it's built long before we even sit down at our desks.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating piece of source material today from the Easy English podcast, and it's titled Daily Routines for a Better Life.
Yeah, it's a great one.
And our mission today is to extract the core insights about how tiny, seemingly insignificant daily routines, specifically around learning something new, like a language, can fundamentally rewire our stress levels, boost our productivity, and just, well, shape our future.
The premise sounds deceptively simple, honestly, but it's actually this profound look at the mechanics of human behavior, because the habits we repeat on autopilot are the exact things shaping our neurological baseline.
Okay, let's unpack this because I think so many of us, and definitely you listening right now, struggle with this constant ambient feeling of information overload. We're just desperate for a solution.
Definitely.
And the source material illustrates this modern struggle beautifully through a character named Daniel. So he works in a busy city office, his days are completely packed, and his entire life basically feels disorganized and stressful.
Yeah, he's highly relatable.
Right. But the text pinpoints the origin of his stress, and it isn't his boss or his deadlines. It's actually a toxic behavioral loop that begins the night before.
Exactly. The material describes a classic case of what psychologists call revenge bedtime procrastination.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so Daniel stays up way, way too late scrolling on his phone. He tells himself, he's just going to relax for a few minutes, but those minutes turn into hours.
Which really begs the question of why he's doing it in the first place. I mean, he knows he has to work the next day. He knows he's going to be exhausted.
Right, he knows the consequences.
But he does it anyway because his entire day has been commanded by other people. His inbox owns his morning. His boss owns his afternoon. So by the time 11:80 or p.m. rolls around, scrolling on his phone is basically the only tiny sliver of autonomy he has left. He is sacrificing sleep just to reclaim this false sense of personal freedom.
That autonomy deficit is exactly the driver here. And the biological cost of that is just massive. Because he stays up late chasing that cheap dopamine, he wakes up late.
Naturally.
And he wakes up deep in a state of sleep inertia, so he's feeling groggy and panicked. He skips breakfast, throws his clothes on, rushes out the door, and arrives at the office already just swimming in cortisol.
It's like, think of your daily willpower and cognitive capacity like a smartphone battery.
Okay, I like that.
Waking up and immediately panicking about being late or checking stressful emails while you're still in bed is the equivalent of turning your screen brightness to 100% and opening 5 heavy battery-draining apps at once.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a perfect way to visualize it.
Right. So by 10:00 a.m., Daniel's internal battery is already at like 40%. He's spending the rest of the day in low power mode, trying to compensate by pouring caffeine into a system that is biologically just begging for rest.
He is totally substituting genuine physiological recovery with adrenaline. It's a perfect storm of biological disruption.
He really is.
And because he spends 12 hours running on that synthetic, stressful energy, by the time he gets home, his prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for self-control and long-term planning, is effectively offline.
It's just fried.
Totally fried. He doesn't have the cognitive battery left to do anything but seek out that cheap dopamine again, so the cycle just locks him in.
It's literally trying to build a house on quicksand. If that foundational first hour is rushed and unstable, everything you build on top of it throughout the day is just going to sink into stress and exhaustion.
Exactly. But then the story introduces us to his coworker, Sophia.
Yes, the contrast here is amazing.
Right. They work in the exact same environment, dealing with the exact same office pressures. But Daniel notices Sophia is the complete opposite of him. She's balanced, efficient, and crucially, she still has energy left over at the end of the day.
Which is basically a superpower in that kind of office.
It really is. So naturally, Daniel assumes she has some sort of superhuman Silicon Valley-style time management system. He asks for her secret.
And what she says is so simple.
Her answer is the cornerstone of the entire text. She tells him there is no secret. It's simply the architecture of her daily routine. She wakes up at the exact same time every single day.
No hitting snooze.
No hitting snooze. And the very first thing she does, before she even thinks about looking at a screen, is drink a glass of water and take a short walk outside for fresh air to clear her mind.
And then she spends just a few minutes planning her day to focus on what's important.
Right. What's fascinating here is the absolute intentionality of that sequence. Sophia isn't doing anything superhuman. She is front-loading her day with deliberate action rather than reaction.
Because when Daniel wakes up and immediately looks at his phone, he's letting external demands dictate his internal state. He is instantly on the defensive.
Yes, exactly. Whereas Sophia, by getting fresh air and planning her day, is actively taking control of her environment.
She's protecting her battery. By keeping those heavy apps closed for the first hour of the day, she preserves her cognitive load. If you don't engineer a morning that allows for quiet intentionality, it absolutely does not matter what kind of organizational structure you try to build at the office. You are constantly trying to correct a foundational wobble.
And that foundational stability changes everything about how the rest of the day unfolds. Because Sophia hasn't depleted her prefrontal cortex by 3:00 p.m., she actually has the willpower required to make good decisions at 8:00 p.m.
The morning routine is the secret mechanism that makes her evening routine possible.
It really is. They're completely connected.
Which brings us to the most crucial pivot in the source material, I think. We see how the morning dictates the evening. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human behavior.
Yeah, you can't just delete a bad habit.
Right, you cannot just tell yourself, I am not going to scroll on my phone tonight. You have to give your brain an alternative destination. So instead of spending hours doom scrolling, Sophia unwinds by reading to relax and learn something new.
The text specifically notes she reads a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. Teach yourself.
Okay.
The stories are simple, they're enjoyable, and they help her improve her vocabulary without feeling like a massive cognitive burden.
So, seeing her success, Daniel decides to borrow this strategy to improve his own English. He ditches the phone before bed and picks up a book called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Which is a pretty big shift for him.
Huge shift. And the text is very honest about his initial experience. At first, he reads slowly. It requires a different kind of neural pathway than passive scrolling. But because the stories are engaging and the language feels natural, it very quickly transforms into a quiet, relaxing part of his evening routine.
It becomes something he actually looks forward to.
But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back a little on behalf of anyone listening who has ever tried to study as an adult.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Wait, studying grammar right before bed usually sounds absolutely exhausting. We associate adult learning with, like, heavy textbooks, flashcards, and stressful memorization.
Right, the traditional school approach.
Yeah. If Daniel is already burnt out from a busy office job, how does picking up a book with the word grammar in the title actually help him relax? Doesn't that just feel like a second job?
That is such a valid question, and that reaction highlights how fundamentally we misunderstand the mechanics of adult learning.
Oh.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategy Daniel is employing here isn't rote memorization at all. It's a sophisticated form of cognitive offloading known as frictionless acquisition.
Frictionless acquisition, okay.
Yeah, the mechanism detailed in the text isn't about cramming dense rules or testing yourself until you're stressed out. It's about narrative.
Oh, so the story itself acts as kind of a Trojan horse for the grammar and vocabulary.
Exactly. A Trojan horse is a great way to put it. Humans are neurologically hardwired for stories. So when Daniel reads these specific books, he isn't staring at a verb conjugation table. He's integrating simple, enjoyable narratives into his wind-down routine.
That makes a lot of sense.
And in the field of linguistics, there is this concept called the affective filter. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, actually. What is that?
So when we are stressed, anxious, or frankly just trying too hard, that filter goes up, and our brain blocks new language acquisition. It's a defense mechanism.
Wow. So stress literally stops you from learning.
It literally does. So by reading a low-stakes story in bed, Daniel lowers his affective filter completely.
He shifts his brain out of the high-alert, problem-solving mode required at the office and into this state of imaginative absorption. The learning becomes a natural byproduct of simply being engaged in the narrative.
That's it exactly. It replaces the anxious, unpredictable noise of social media with a single, focused, calming narrative arc.
Because doom scrolling provides those erratic, unearned dopamine spikes that leave the brain jittery and depleted, right?
Yes. Whereas reading a story provides a slow release, sustained engagement. It is a completely different neurochemical experience. Engaging with a new language through a story isn't a chore. It becomes an incredibly effective act of self-care.
That reframing is entirely paradigm shifting. Learning is self-care.
It really changes everything.
Once Daniel experiences that frictionless acquisition once he realizes that improving his English doesn't have to be a miserable, stressful grind, it unlocks a much broader realization about his life in general.
Yeah, the text mentions he discovers a third book which really solidifies this entire philosophy for him.
Right, he finds a book called Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native.
Yes, and the core philosophy of this book mirrors exactly what he just experienced, that learning should feel natural. It advocates for listening to stories, repeating phrases, and making it part of everyday life, building these tiny, frictionless habits.
And this philosophy inspires a holistic transformation for him. Daniel realizes that improving his life and improving his mind rely on the exact same underlying mechanism.
It's all connected.
So he starts applying the effortless approach to his mornings too. He begins waking up just a little bit earlier. He prepares a simple breakfast to stabilize his blood sugar instead of running on adrenaline.
Which is huge for your cortisol levels.
Absolutely. And he writes a short list of tasks before work to focus his mind, just like Sophia does.
And I think we really need to pay close attention to the scale of the changes he makes. The text emphasizes that these adjustments are micro adjustments.
Right. He isn't completely reinventing his identity overnight.
Exactly. He isn't committing to 3 hours of intense grammar study or a grueling 4 a.m. fitness boot camp.
But the outputs are entirely disproportionate to those tiny inputs. After just a few weeks, Daniel realizes he's vastly more focused at work. He has sustained energy. He is far less stressed. He discovers that a better life doesn't require massive, dramatic overhauls.
And this raises an important question about our culture at large. I mean, we live in a society that constantly glorifies massive, stressful effort.
Oh, completely. Hustle culture.
Right. We worship the montage of the person pushing themselves to the absolute breaking point to achieve a goal. But the neurological reality demonstrated by this story is that true sustainable progress, whether it's mastering a new language or getting your daily anxiety under control, is actually quiet. It's steady. It's incremental.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Think about it like watering a delicate houseplant.
Okay, I love a good houseplant analogy.
You don't ignore a plant for 29 days, then dump a massive 10-gallon bucket of water on it once a month and expect it to thrive.
Yeah, you drown it.
Exactly. The shock will kill it, or the soil will just wash away entirely. You give it a little bit of water every single day. A gentle, consistent drip feed. How might you apply this drip feed approach to your own learning goals?
That drip feed approach elegantly bypasses the brain's natural resistance to change. When you try to overhaul your entire life at once, your nervous system interprets that sudden shift as a threat.
It freaks out.
It totally freaks out. The amygdala fires up, and you inevitably retreat back to your old, comfortable habits, even if those habits, like doom scrolling until 2:00 a.m., are actively harming you.
But if you just add a glass of water in the morning or 5 minutes of a short story at night, you slip right past the brain's security system. Doesn't trigger the alarm bells.
Exactly. The brain accepts the new habit, integrates it, and allows it to compound.
It's the literal compounding interest of personal development. The daily routines you run on autopilot shape your neurological baseline.
Yeah.
If you want to wake up with purpose, you have to engineer an environment that makes purpose the path of least resistance. You have to take care of your cognitive battery first before you let the world drain it.
Which requires looking at your own environment with a highly critical eye. So, we want to issue a direct challenge to you today. Take a moment and identify your own Daniel habits.
Oh yeah, we all have them.
We really do. Look at your own nightstand tonight. If your phone charger is closer to your pillow than a book is, you are engineering your environment for failure before you even go to sleep.
Find just one of those chaotic friction points in your daily routine. What is the equivalent of the skipped breakfast or the late night scrolling in your life? Ask yourself how you can swap it out for a frictionless Sophia habit today.
It doesn't have to be a monumental shift. Leave your phone in the kitchen overnight. Put a physical book on your nightstand.
Read a little, listen a little, practice a little. Give yourself permission to make learning and living effortless.
Establishing that baseline of calm intentionality is the non-negotiable prerequisite for any kind of meaningful long-term growth.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you plan out your day tomorrow.
Let's hear it.
The source material beautifully illustrates the transformative power of building strict, positive habits. It shows us how to protect our cognitive battery and avoid the trap of reactive stress. But consider this. What happens when we intentionally disrupt our own perfect routines?
Oh, wow. That completely flips the paradigm on its head.
Right, because life is inherently unpredictable. If we become overly reliant on a highly structured, perfectly engineered morning routine like you have to have the exact glass of water, the exact walk, the exact 10 minutes of quiet planning time, does that hyper-optimization actually make us fragile?
That's a really interesting point.
If your alarm doesn't go off or there's a family emergency, does the loss of the routine completely derail your emotional regulation for the whole day? Or does having that strong baseline routine most of the time actually build up a reservoir of mental resilience? Does it give you the neurological flexibility required to handle the chaos when it inevitably comes?
It's the difference between a rigid structure that shatters under pressure and a strong foundation that absorbs the shock.
Exactly. It's something for you to think about the next time your alarm clock goes off, and you're faced with a choice between the battery-draining quicksand of the screen or the solid ground of your own intentions. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Keep learning, keep growing, and we will catch you next time. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I want you to imagine a scenario that is probably incredibly familiar to you.
Oh, yeah, I think we all know this one.
Right. So you are sitting in a crowded conference room, or, maybe you're dialed into one of those massive video calls.
The ones where half the cameras are off.
Exactly. And the energy is just fractured. People are checking their phones. They're monitoring their Slack messages. You can tell they're having sidebar conversations.
Just entirely tuned out.
Yeah. And then one person takes the floor to speak. And almost instantly, the room's attention just completely dissipates. The sidebars keep going. The multitasking actually speeds up.
It's like they become background noise.
Right, just white noise. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, someone else speaks, and the entire room goes dead silent.
Phones go face down.
Phones go face down. The eye contact just snaps right to the speaker. The whole atmospheric pressure of the room fundamentally shifts. And so the question we have to ask today is, what is the mechanical difference between those two speakers?
It is, it's one of the most persistent dynamics in any professional environment. I mean, we see it constantly.
Constantly.
But pinpointing the exact mechanism that causes one person to command a space while another just becomes that white noise you mentioned, it's notoriously difficult.
Because we usually just call it charisma.
Exactly. It gets written off as this intangible charisma or, natural presence, which isn't particularly helpful if you're actually trying to deconstruct it and learn from it.
And that is exactly what we're going to deconstruct today. Our source material for this deep dive is an excerpt from a really fascinating piece. It's called How to Speak Like the 1% Elite.
That title always gets people.
It does. It comes to us from the Easy English podcast series on the architecture of elite communication. And our mission today is to mine this text for the structural, everyday habits that actually generate that kind of commanding communication.
We want to move past the vague idea of charisma.
Right, and look at the actual behavioral architecture. But right out of the gate, we need to address that title.
Yeah, How to Speak Like the 1% Elite. It carries a lot of baggage.
So much baggage.
It immediately suggests this exclusionary set of tactics, like maybe you need formal elocution training or this massive encyclopedic vocabulary.
Or like a manufactured hyper-dominant alpha persona just designed to overpower a room.
Right, but the source material aggressively dismantles that assumption right away, which I love.
Me too. It is the biggest surprise. The central thesis here is that elite communication is entirely divorced from complex vocabulary.
Entirely.
There is zero correlation between utilizing a robust thesaurus and actually commanding an audience's attention. The person who silences that room isn't doing it by deploying multisyllabic jargon to prove how smart they are.
No, in fact, the foundation presented in the text argues that true elite communication relies on a triad of behaviors. They're highly accessible, but rarely mastered.
And those are?
Speaking clearly, speaking calmly, and speaking with purpose. It completely shifts the focus. It's not about overwhelming the listener with linguistic complexity. It's about anchoring the space with intentionality.
I love that phrase, anchoring the space. And the source material anchors this theory in a really practical narrative. It introduces us to an observer named Victor.
Victor is great. He's essentially an avatar for anyone navigating a modern corporate structure today.
Right. His daily schedule is just a marathon of cross-functional meetings. He's interfacing with entry-level colleagues, mid-level management, all the way up to the executive suite.
He's immersed in the full spectrum of corporate communication every single day.
which makes him the perfect observer.
Exactly. He operates like this embedded anthropologist. Because he's constantly moving between different tiers of the hierarchy, he has the exposure needed to recognize behavioral patterns, patterns that might be totally invisible to someone who's just isolated in one single department.
He's studying the ecosystem, and Victor observes the exact phenomenon we outlined at the start. He notes this really painful delta in these meetings. Some individuals speak into a complete void.
Just nothing coming back.
Yeah. Yet, when a specific subset of leaders speak, the room reorganizes itself around them. The noise floor just drops. So Victor starts dissecting the variables. He's trying to isolate what makes their delivery so undeniably authoritative.
He's looking for those behavioral markers of status and authority. And his conclusion really challenges the conventional wisdom of corporate posturing.
It really does.
He notes that the individuals who naturally pull attention, they do not rely on volume. They don't rely on aggression. They aren't trying to physically dominate the space.
Instead, Victor identifies 3 structural pillars in their approach. Number 1, their word choice is surprisingly simple. Number 2, their vocal delivery is profoundly calm. And number 3, the ideas they present are heavily distilled and clear.
Simple words, calm voice, clear ideas.
It sounds so deceptively basic on paper, doesn't it?
It really does. But executing them in a high-stakes environment where everyone is literally fighting for airtime, that requires a massive amount of self-regulation.
Let's break those down. If we look at the first pillar, simplicity, it forces us to examine why people default to complexity in the first place. Think about the most powerful speakers in your own life. They probably rely on simplicity, right? But there is this deeply ingrained instinct in corporate culture to use jargon as a mechanism to signal competence.
Oh, absolutely. And that instinct is rooted entirely in self-preservation.
How so?
Well, when individuals use dense, acronym-heavy language, they're often building a linguistic defensive perimeter.
The defensive perimeter. That is such a good way to put it.
Right. The psychology behind it suggests this deep fear of being exposed or questioned. Because if an idea is buried in enough corporate buzzwords, it becomes really difficult for anyone else to critique it.
You can't attack what you can't understand.
Exactly. But Victor notes that the leaders who command the room, they completely abandon that defensive posture. They utilize simple language because they have immense confidence in the structural integrity of their ideas.
They aren't hiding behind a dictionary.
No, they don't want to hide the concept at all. They want it fully exposed to the light.
But, and I have to ask this, there is a tension there, especially in highly specialized fields. You know, if you oversimplify a complex engineering concept or a really nuanced financial strategy, you run the risk of alienating an expert audience. Or you might look like you don't grasp the nuance yourself. So how does the source material reconcile that need for simplicity with the necessity of demonstrating deep expertise?
It's a critical distinction to make. The text is not advocating for reductionism.
Okay.
It isn't suggesting you strip away the necessary technical data. Rather, it points out that the complexity should live entirely within the idea itself, not in the syntax you use to deliver it.
Ah, okay. The idea is complex, the delivery is simple.
Precisely. The goal is to reduce the cognitive load on the listener. Because when you force an audience to constantly decode your vocabulary, you're taxing their working memory. Elite communicators remove that friction.
They build a frictionless pathway.
Exactly, from their brain straight to the listener's brain.
Which brings us to the second pillar, the calm voice. And this goes way beyond just, having a pleasant tone of voice. It touches on the actual neurobiology of stress.
This is where it gets really fascinating.
Because in a high-pressure meeting, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Heart rates go up, breathing gets shallow, vocal cords physically tighten. The physiological default in that environment is to speak rapidly and at a higher pitch.
And that rapid speech pattern is particularly revealing. When a person speeds up their delivery, they are subconsciously signaling a lack of status to the room.
Because they're rushing.
Yes, they're operating under the assumption that they only hold the room's attention conditionally. Like, if I don't rush through this point right now, someone is going to interrupt me and steal the floor.
It's a posture of scarcity.
Exactly, scarcity. But a calm, measured vocal pace signals the exact opposite. It communicates this deep-seated belief that the room will wait for you. It signals safety and control to the listener's autonomic nervous system.
But remaining calm when your adrenaline is spiking is incredibly difficult. I mean, you're essentially fighting millions of years of evolutionary programming that's screaming at you to either run out of the room or verbally attack someone.
Bro.
So the leaders, Victor observes, They aren't immune to adrenaline, right?
No, they're human.
Right. They've just developed the capacity to downregulate their physical response in real time.
Yes, they are managing their physiological baseline. By consciously slowing their breathing, maintaining a lower vocal register, they literally force their nervous system out of that fight or flight state and into an executive functioning state.
And that affects everyone else in the room.
Absolutely, because human nervous systems are highly attuned to each other. It's a concept known as co-regulation.
Co-regulation.
Right, so a speaker who projects genuine physiological calm will literally lower the collective heart rate of the entire room.
That is the true source of their gravitational pull. It's biological.
It is.
Which leads directly into the third pillar, the clarity of their ideas. And this requires a rigorous filtering process before your mouth even opens.
Yes, it does.
Because a lot of communication in meetings is essentially just public brainstorming.
Oh, the worst kind of meetings.
Right. People are just thinking out loud. They're working through their logic in real time, dragging the entire room through their internal rough draft.
Such a great way to put it, the internal rough draft.
But the elite communicators Victor's studies, they've already done that mental processing.
Because distillation is a cognitively demanding process. It requires you to prioritize information, identify your core thesis, and just ruthlessly eliminate any tangential thoughts.
There's that famous quote by the philosopher Blaise Pascal.
Oh, about the letter.
Yeah, he apologizes for writing a long letter because he didn't have the time to write a short one.
It's so true. Brevity and clarity are not the default settings of the human brain. They are the result of rigorous mental editing. By presenting a clear, distilled idea, the speaker is absorbing the cognitive burden so the listener doesn't have to.
I think we all intuitively recognize this when we experience it. I want you to think about the most effective communicators you interact with. You will rarely find them just meandering through a point. Their power lies in their efficiency.
Absolutely.
But Victor's observations, they don't just end with these broad architectural pillars. The source material actually pivots to a highly specific tactical observation.
This is my favorite part of the whole text.
It's so actionable. Victor studies a company director and isolates this distinct behavioral mechanism that the director uses to establish dominance in a conversation.
Right. This is where the theoretical framework we've been talking about translates into a concrete, observable action. Victor realizes that the director's defining characteristic isn't actually what he says, it's what he refuses to do.
The director absolutely refuses to rush.
Never rushes.
The text focuses on the moments immediately following a question. When this director is asked a question, particularly a challenging one, he does not immediately begin to speak. He deploys a deliberate, sustained pause.
And the mechanics of that pause are worth a really deep analysis, because it is an incredibly abrasive technique to execute in a modern corporate environment.
It feels wrong to do it.
It does. Our culture equates speed with extreme competence. We are conditioned from a young age to believe that a rapid-fire response indicates intelligence. It shows you're prepared.
Right.
Silence, in contrast, is usually interpreted as a failure of processing power, like your brain just stalled out.
And that creates intense psychological friction in the room. If someone asks a pointed question in a crowded meeting, the pressure to fill that dead air is just immense.
That is suffocating.
It is. Most people will instinctively generate what is essentially verbal noise.
Yeah.
Stammering, using filler words, or they'll just repeat the question back slowly, all just to prove to the room that their microphone is still on. We are terrified of the vacuum.
The vacuum is inherently uncomfortable. When you pause, you are deliberately stepping into that discomfort. You are holding the tension.
It's a power move.
It's a massive power move. Let's look at what that intentional silence actually communicates to the room. When the director refuses to jump at the question, he's completely subverting the expected power dynamic.
Because usually the person asking the question holds the power.
Exactly. And the person rushing to answer is submitting to that power. They're eager to please. By pausing, the director reclaims the pacing of the entire interaction. He's demonstrating that he operates on his own internal clock, not the timeline dictated by the questioner.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Yay for it.
There is a very fine line between a strategic, authoritative pause
Right.
and a pause that makes it look like you have completely frozen and have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
The deer in the headlights look.
Yes. So how does the director, or really anyone employing this technique, ensure the room perceives the silence as a demonstration of power rather than just a moment of sheer panic?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the differentiation lies entirely in the physical and nonverbal cues that accompany the silence. A panic pause is usually accompanied by a break in eye contact. Erratic physical movements, shifting in your chair, or an expression of alarm. The speaker's body language physically shrinks.
You're looking for the exit.
Exactly. But a strategic pause, what we might call a power pause, is anchored by sustained, relaxed eye contact.
Sustained eye contact, that's key.
It's vital. The posture remains open, it remains grounded. The speaker is physically demonstrating that they are entirely comfortable in the silence. It communicates, I am considering your input with the gravity it deserves, rather than, I am frantically searching my brain for the answer.
That makes total sense. The physical stillness creates the frame for the silence.
Yes.
And the source material also highlights that this pause serves a highly functional purpose. It's not just about status signaling. It acts as a critical filter.
Right.
Think about it. When we succumb to the pressure to answer instantly, those first few seconds of our response are usually just verbal debris.
Well, I think we should probably look at...
Exactly. It's all that hedging that just completely weakens the actual point you're trying to make.
The pause allows that reactionary impulse to pass. When you force a 2 or 3 second delay, you are giving your brain the necessary milliseconds to bypass that rough draft we talked about.
You construct the final sentence before you speak.
Yes, you strip away the defensive qualifiers. And so when you finally do break the silence, the words that come out align perfectly with Victor's initial pillars. They are simple, the delivery is calm, and the idea is fiercely clear.
It also drastically alters how the audience actually receives the information. If you immediately launch into an answer, your words just kind of blend into the existing momentum of the conversation.
They get lost in the wash.
But a sustained pause acts as an auditory reset. It forces the audience to lean in. It builds this subtle anticipation, which gives the subsequent statement significantly more weight and perceived value.
You are literally manufacturing gravity.
Manufacturing gravity, I love that.
By withholding the response, you increase the perceived value of the information you're about to provide. But, and this is a big but, implementing this requires a very high tolerance for social discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
For an individual who is accustomed to rapid-fire banter, sitting in 3 seconds of silence while 20 people stare at you, it will feel agonizing. The internal perception of time completely distorts. 3 seconds will feel like 30 seconds.
That is the core challenge.
Yeah.
Overriding those internal alarm bells that are just screaming at you to make noise.
Yeah.
You have to intellectually understand that the audience is not perceiving the silence the way you are.
Exactly. They don't think you're failing. They think you're thinking.
And in a business environment that is just saturated with reactionary opinions, a measured, thoughtful response is a massive differentiator.
It entirely redefines the concept of elite communication. It moves it away from the acquisition of new, complex skills and repositions it as a practice of extreme discipline and reduction.
You're subtracting, not adding.
Exactly. You aren't adding elements to your communication style. You are systematically stripping away the anxiety, the rush, and the unnecessary complexity.
Which is a highly democratizing takeaway when you think about it. It means that the mechanics of commanding a room are available to literally anyone.
Anyone willing to tolerate the discomfort of slowing down.
Right. It requires the courage to rely on clear ideas rather than hiding behind a wall of corporate terminology.
It's the ultimate application of restraint. The director's influence isn't generated by his output, it's generated by his modulation. He operates entirely immune to the frantic frequency of the room around him.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to challenge you, the listener, to conduct what we can call the Victor experiment during your schedule this week.
Highly recommend doing this.
The next time you find yourself in a complex multi-stakeholder meeting, step out of the participant mindset and adopt the observer role. Pay strict attention to the communication architecture of the room. Identify who is speaking into the void and who is actually anchoring the space.
Look for the application of simple language. Notice the baseline physiological calmness of the really effective speakers.
And specifically, watch for the deliberate use of the pause.
Identifying the technique in the wild is the crucial first step. The subsequent step, of course, is testing your own tolerance for it.
That's the hard part.
It is. When you're presented with a high-friction question, attempt to hold the space for just 2 seconds before engaging your vocal cords. Observe how that minute delay shifts your own internal state and alters the reception of your answer.
It will fundamentally change your relationship with the pacing of your own professional life. This has been a rigorous examination of the structural mechanics behind influence. But as we close our analysis of this material, there's a broader implication we really want to leave you to consider on your own.
We've spent this whole time dissecting the utility of the pause and the power of restraint.
And it prompts a necessary self-examination about our default behaviors. Think about this. If the ultimate indicator of secure, elite communication is the capacity to hold silence and speak with unadorned simplicity,
What does our relentless, anxious compulsion to instantly fill every available second of dead air reveal about the depth of our own professional insecurities?
that is a heavy question to sit with the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to break the silence in a room. Thank you for joining us for this analysis. We will see you on the next Deep Dive.
So I want to start off today by asking you, the listener, a pretty straightforward question. Have you ever felt that really specific, heavy emotional exhaustion that just hits you while you're scrolling through the morning news?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've all been there.
Right. Like
Yeah.
before you even get out of bed, it just makes the whole world feel totally overwhelming. Like everything is just completely broken.
It's a very real phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host.
And I'm your resident expert. Glad to be here.
So today we're exploring a really fascinating narrative. It comes from the Easy English podcast, and it's an episode titled Finding Hope When the World Feels Broken.
Which is such a great title, by the way.
It really is. And we're going to unpack the story of this guy, Amir. We're looking at his specific daily habits to understand this really surprising intersection.
Right, the connection between media consumption, language learning, and mental well-being.
Exactly. And I want to set the stage here because this isn't some deep dive into global policy, you know?
No, not at all.
We aren't trying to solve international relations. We're exploring how changing the literal way we consume information can, actually rewire your worldview.
Yeah, it's really a masterclass in neuroplasticity, even if it doesn't seem like it at first glance.
Totally. So let's get right into Amir's starting situation because, well, it's going to sound uncomfortably familiar to a lot of you listening.
I know, it sounded familiar to me.
Right. So his morning routine. He wakes up, and before his feet even hit the floor, he's on his phone.
Doom scrolling.
Endless doom scrolling. He is just bombarded by headlines. We're talking economic struggles, international conflicts, social media arguments.
Just endless criticism and negativity.
Exactly. And this leads to this profound feeling of emotional fatigue, like total powerlessness.
Yeah, it's a modern psychological fatigue.
I was thinking about this, and the best analogy I could come up with is it's like putting on a backpack first thing in the morning.
Okay, a backpack.
Yeah, and every time you read a negative headline, you drop a heavy rock into it.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right. So by noon, the sheer weight of all the world's problems is in that backpack, and you are literally unable to move forward. You're paralyzed.
Which makes total sense from a cognitive standpoint.
How so?
Well, the news amplifies these macro-level anxieties, right?
Mm-hmm.
It highlights the absolute worst of humanity because it preys on our evolutionary negativity bias.
Our brains are looking for danger.
Exactly.
Mm.
For thousands of years, survival meant noticing the predator, not the pretty sunset.
Right.
So digital media hijacks that.
Mm.
It makes your brain think you are in immediate physical danger.
Wow. Even though you're just in bed with your phone.
Exactly. But then Amir makes this shift, and it's not some grand epiphany. It's just a change in his physical environment.
Yeah, this part is so interesting. It's evening, and he just unplugs. He goes for a slow walk through his neighborhood.
Just a simple walk.
Yeah. The sky is turning orange. The streets are quiet. He's suddenly noticing all these little
And the micro-level stuff.
Exactly. Like he sees this young woman helping an elderly man carry heavy groceries up some steps.
Such a contrast to the internet.
Completely. And he sees two kids across the street laughing, playing ball in the park.
Just everyday life.
Right. He walks past a community garden where some volunteers are quietly planting flowers and trees.
And that contrast is so crucial. When you slow down, your brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, it starts to stand down.
It stops freaking out.
Exactly. The alarm bells stop ringing. The news shows you a world that's burning down. But his physical street is actually humming with these quiet acts of generosity and connection.
Which are so easy to miss when you're caught up in the macro level anxiety.
Oh, entirely invisible when you're in survival mode.
Right. So this sets up his evening routine, which honestly totally surprised me.
It's a really unique pivot.
It really is. So
Yeah.
Amir sits down on a neighborhood bench, But he doesn't pull out his phone to scroll.
No.
And he doesn't pull out, like, a light novel to just zone out.
Yeah.
He pulls out a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners.
The teach yourself one, right?
Yeah, exactly. He is intentionally trying to improve his English. He's reading these simple stories about everyday life, human emotions, personal growth.
Which is such a brilliant move for his mental state.
Well, wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you are already emotionally drained by the weight of the world, like we said, your backpack is full of rocks.
Right, you're exhausted.
Why on earth would you turn to the actual mental strain of learning a new language?
It seems counterintuitive.
I mean, shouldn't he just zone out, put on some reality TV and turn his brain off?
You'd think so, but the expert consensus on this is really fascinating.
Okay, tell me.
Because reading in a second language forces a slower, much more deliberate pace. It actually acts as a form of mindfulness.
Oh, interesting.
Mindfulness. Yeah. See, if you just zone out in front of the TV, your brain's default mode network is still running.
So the anxiety is still humming in the background.
Exactly. It's like background apps draining your battery.
Yeah.
But learning a language requires so much working memory, all your cognitive RAM.
You literally can't think about the global economy because you're trying to figure out a verb conjugation.
Exactly. Instead of an exhausting academic exercise, the heavy cognitive load forces you into the present moment.
Wow. So the simple stories actually help him relax and ground himself because his brain physically doesn't have the bandwidth to worry.
That's it, exactly. It's an active grounding technique.
That is so wild. And it gets even deeper because a few days later, he picks up a second book.
Right, he moves on to grammar.
Yeah, the book is called Learn English Through Stories, 16 Stories to Improve Your English Grammar and English Vocabulary.
Right, the title.
Very literal title. But this is where Amir starts finding these hidden life lessons inside the actual grammar exercises.
This is where the structural neuroplasticity really kicks in.
Yeah, because he starts noticing that the mechanics of language and the mechanics of life are like running parallel to each other.
How so?
Well, the stories remind him that every single challenge in life contains the possibility of growth.
Oh, I love that.
Right. It's like learning grammar.
Yeah.
At first, all those rules and exceptions, they seem super confusing.
Completely insurmountable for a beginner.
Exactly. But as you practice, the very thing that was a barrier, like the confusing grammar rule, becomes the actual tool you use to understand the world better.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The obstacle becomes the instrument.
Yeah. It's like navigating life's struggles. You sit with the friction, and eventually it builds resilience instead of just causing despair.
And he's actively retraining his brain to interpret difficulty differently.
Right. Difficulty isn't a sign that reality is broken anymore.
It's just a phase of learning, which perfectly transitions into the next phase of his journey.
Yes. Segment 4, the power of storytelling and mindset. Because this all evolves into a completely different philosophical outlook for him.
He really levels up his approach here.
He does. He starts reading a third book, Effortless English, Learn to Speak English Like a Native.
Which is heavily focused on audio and psychology, right?
Yeah, it focuses on learning through listening, storytelling, and this idea of positive thinking.
Lowering the emotional barrier to learning.
Exactly. And the core concept the book presents is huge. It argues that the mindset we choose dictates the actual world we experience.
Perceptual set theory in action.
Right. So focusing solely on problems makes the world feel dark, but intentionally noticing progress, kindness, and learning entirely changes the landscape.
It changes what your brain allows you to see.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Okay.
Is this book just telling Amir to, like, put on rose-colored glasses?
The toxic positivity question.
Yeah, because we talked earlier about very real economic struggles and geopolitical conflicts. Are we just supposed to ignore all that and smile?
No, absolutely not. And that's a really important nuance to clarify about the source material.
Okay.
The text explicitly states, quote, "The world is not perfect. It acknowledges that the world still has very serious problems."
So it's not about being delusional.
Exactly. The goal isn't toxic positivity or ignoring reality. It's about expanding your lens.
Expanding the lens. I like that.
Yeah, so you don't only see the brokenness. When you're doom scrolling, you're zoomed in on the cracks in the foundation.
And if that's all you see, you think the whole house is falling down.
Right. But expanding the lens allows you to acknowledge the cracks, but also see the millions of quiet, daily acts of kindness that hold the structure together.
So it's about restoring balance to how you perceive reality.
Exactly. It's a balanced information diet.
Which brings us to the final piece of Amir's puzzle, and honestly the most inspiring part.
The behavioral change.
Yes, from passive observer to active participant.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't just sit on the bench feeling better about himself.
Right. Internal shifts usually lead to external action.
Totally. Amir actually replaces his endless scrolling with physical connection in his community.
Taking real action.
Yeah, he helps a neighbor fix a broken fence. He volunteers over the weekend to clean up a local park. And he just begins greeting people in his neighborhood more often.
Just looking up and saying hello.
Simple things, right. But it creates this amazing feedback loop.
Because he's proving to his brain that his actions matter.
Yes. He returns to that same park he helped clean, and he sees kids playing there. He sees neighbors talking.
Real, tangible results.
He sees someone walking their dog, laughing with a friend. And the more he participates in these small acts, the more hopeful he feels.
It's the perfect antidote to that learned helplessness we talked about at the start.
Because he's actually doing something.
Exactly. When you just consume news, you have zero control. But taking local action gives you agency back.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here from a psychological perspective?
Synthesizing all of this, the main takeaway is that hope is rarely the result of massive global shifts.
Right, we're always waiting for the world to fix itself before we feel hopeful.
But that's not how it works.
Huh.
Hope is generated quietly through microactions, shared knowledge, and localized human connection.
It's built block by block.
Exactly. It's an active behavior, not just a feeling.
That is so powerful, and it really brings Amir's whole journey into focus for us.
It's a great narrative.
It really is. So just to recap for everyone listening, we watched Amir change a daily habit from passively doom-scrolling the news to intentionally reading and learning a language.
And that single shift lowered his anxiety.
Right, it forced mindfulness, which then led to community action and a completely renewed sense of hope.
It proves that hope doesn't disappear.
No, it just waits for us to notice the small good things. Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought to end on today.
I love these. What do you have for the listeners?
Well, I want you to mull this over on your own. If the language and the stories we consume physically shape our emotional reality, like we just saw with Amir, what would happen if you audited your own daily information diet for just 1 week?
Just 1 week? That's a great challenge.
Right. Like if you treated every article you read or every conversation you had as a literal language lesson in how to view the world.
Oh, well. What vocabulary are you learning?
Exactly. How quickly would your own emotional vocabulary change? Are you studying the language of catastrophe, or are you practicing the grammar of resilience?
That is a phenomenal question to leave them with.
I think so, too. It's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about the next time I pick up my phone in the morning.
Me too. Time to put down the heavy rocks.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and maybe go read a good book on a park bench today.
Welcome to this deep dive. You know, I was thinking recently about how when we learn basic math as kids, there's this deep, almost profound comfort in the certainty of it.
Oh, absolutely. It's very safe.
Right. Like 2 + 2 is always 4. You put in the correct inputs and you get the guaranteed output. It's clean, it's completely predictable, and it makes total sense to our developing brains.
Yeah, it's a closed system. There's no ambiguity, no gray area to navigate. You just follow the rules and you get the reward of the correct answer.
Exactly. But then you graduate from math class, you enter adulthood, and suddenly you start applying that same rigid arithmetic to human happiness.
And that is exactly where the math completely falls apart.
It totally shatters. So today, we are deconstructing our societal definition of success. We want to see if we've been measuring it all wrong. We're unpacking an excerpt from The Currency of Contentment, Redefining Success and Growth, specifically a narrative titled Money and Success from the Easy English podcast.
It's a really fascinating source text.
It really is. And to anchor this for you, the listener, we are looking at a guy in the story named Ryan.
Right, Ryan. He basically represents the quintessential modern worker. I mean, he is the person executing the societal formula flawlessly.
He really is. Like, Ryan is incredibly hardworking. He's super ambitious. He wakes up before dawn, puts in these grueling hours at the office, and his mind is just, it's constantly running in the background.
Yeah, calculating how to earn the next promotion.
Exactly. He looks at the people he follows online. You know, he sees the curated luxury lifestyles, the expensive cars, the sprawling houses, the endless vacations.
All the shiny things.
All of it. And he makes a vow to himself that he is going to attain that level of visible success. He assumes Getting back to our math problem, that more money plus more hours must automatically equal more happiness.
And the crazy part is he actually achieves the external metrics he set out to conquer.
Right.
He gets the good salary, he
Yeah.
buys the expensive things, he moves into the nice apartment. If you're looking at his life as a spreadsheet, all the columns add up perfectly.
That is the game.
He essentially wins the game he was taught to play.
But the formula is broken. Because despite having all the things he thought he wanted, the expected output of happiness just never arrives.
It never shows up.
Instead, Ryan is exhausted. He's chronically stressed out. He rarely has a moment to relax. He barely sees his family, and he finds himself staring at the ceiling late at night, asking himself, why am I not happy?
Which is such a common experience, right? This points to a massive psychological disconnect.
Oh, for sure. How so?
Well, Ryan successfully built the infrastructure of a life, but he entirely forgot to factor in the actual experience of living it.
Wow, yeah.
He constructed the shell of success, but the interior is hollow. It's a perfect example of what psychologists refer to as the hedonic treadmill.
Right, the hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. You run harder and faster to acquire the next thing, assuming it will bring lasting joy. But the dopamine hit of the purchase fades almost immediately.
And then you're just stuck maintaining it.
Precisely. You are simply left with the maintenance of that new lifestyle. And maintaining a more expensive lifestyle usually requires more stress, more hours, and honestly, more anxiety.
Which means his entire worldview is essentially a trap of his own making.
Yes.
And realizing that your operating system is fundamentally flawed makes encountering someone on a completely different operating system incredibly jarring.
It's a total shock to the system.
Which brings us to the cafe revelation. Ryan meets up with an old friend of his named Omar.
Right. And they meet in a small, quiet cafe, which stands in stark contrast to the high-stress, high-velocity environment Ryan usually inhabits.
Yeah, you can just picture it. Ryan sits down, probably vibrating with residual work anxiety, checking his phone, stressing about unread emails. And he looks across the table at Omar.
And Omar is just entirely different.
Totally. Omar is genuinely calm. He's deeply relaxed. He's quick to smile. But here is the detail that just breaks Ryan's brain.
Yeah.
Omar does not have a high-paying job.
No, he lives a very simple life.
Very simple. So Ryan, who has literally sacrificed his physical health and peace of mind to accumulate wealth, cannot process what he is seeing. He asks Omar directly, like, how can you possibly be so happy without chasing more money?
And Omar's response is just a masterclass in nuanced, grounded thinking.
It really is.
He doesn't fall into the trap of demonizing money.
Right. He's not anti-money.
Exactly. He acknowledges its utility. He tells Ryan that money is important, but it is not everything. Omar views money strictly as a tool that provides a baseline of comfort.
Yeah.
It's excellent at solving very specific practical problems like shelter and food, but he points out that money fundamentally cannot purchase peace of mind.
No.
It cannot buy strong, resilient relationships, and it cannot generate real, enduring happiness from within.
Because Omar has established a totally different metric for success. For him, the ultimate currency is balance.
Balance, exactly.
Success means having the time to rest, the time to be present with his family, and time to grow as a human being. He finds profound joy in just taking morning walks or having unhurried conversations with friends.
And learning new skills just for the sake of learning them.
Right, not for how they look on a resume or LinkedIn.
He has decoupled his internal sense of worth from his external economic output.
Which is huge.
In a culture that constantly demands we monetize our hobbies and optimize our free time, Omar's perspective is a radically liberating shift.
It is. Okay, let's pause and push back on Omar's philosophy for a second here.
Sure.
Because here's where it gets really interesting for you and me. Omar tells Ryan his ultimate secret is that he simply doesn't compare his life to others.
Right.
Honestly, how realistic is that for you or me? We live in a digital ecosystem explicitly designed, like engineered by thousands of smart people, to force comparison.
It's literally built for that.
Right? Ryan was constantly bombarded with images of expensive cars and large houses online. How do you just miraculously turn off the urge to compare yourself in an economy that runs on making you feel inadequate so you'll buy more things?
It's a very fair skepticism. I mean, what's fascinating here is that you cannot just block out the external noise through sheer willpower alone.
You just exhaust yourself.
Exactly. The human brain is wired for social comparison. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. But Omar doesn't rely on willpower.
Oh, okay. What does he do?
He creates a completely different internal value system that naturally acts as a shield against that whole ecosystem.
Oh, I see.
Omar consciously places his highest value on simple, intrinsic experiences. The physical sensation of a morning walk, the warmth of a good conversation.
Things you can't buy?
Right. Because he values things that cannot be commodified or ranked on a leaderboard, external comparisons lose their psychological grip on him.
So if your primary goal for the day is to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee and read a book, someone else buying a private jet doesn't actually threaten your goal.
Exactly. The currencies don't translate.
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
You cannot induce envy in someone who operates on a different standard of value. Omar rejects the shiny luxury metrics pushed by social media, not out of spite, but because he recognizes they are fundamentally incapable of delivering the psychological peace he prioritizes.
He defines his own parameters.
He has made himself immune to comparison by refusing to play that specific game.
Okay, I buy that Omar has figured this out for himself. But grasping a philosophical concept while drinking a latte is one thing. Actually taking that concept home and using it to rewire a deeply ingrained hustle mindset, that's a totally different challenge.
Oh, a massive challenge.
Ryan's brain is accustomed to running at 10,000 RPMs. He can't just flip a switch and become a Zen master. If he tries to just sit still in his empty apartment, his anxiety is going to spike.
Yes, his mind will just race.
He needs a tangible mechanism to physically slow his cognitive processing down.
And this is where the narrative introduces a fascinating, highly effective intervention.
I love this part.
To rewire a highly active, anxious brain, you need a task that requires high focus but carries incredibly low stakes.
Low stake, right.
You need something that forces you into the present moment but doesn't trigger your fight or flight response about your career or your finances. And for Ryan, this tool comes from a highly unexpected place.
Beginner English language books.
Yes.
It seems like such a bizarre pivot at first glance. Instead of his usual routine of doom scrolling through social media late at night, feeding that comparison engine we just talked about, Ryan decides to pick up the books his friend Omar recommended.
Right.
Ryan had always vaguely wanted to improve his English, but in his previous mindset, he never made the time for it because it didn't immediately translate to a higher salary.
There was no obvious ROI.
Exactly. No return on investment.
But the lack of immediate financial ROI is exactly why it works as a therapeutic tool. Let's look at the specific resources he utilizes because they function on multiple psychological levels.
Okay, let's break them down.
First, there's a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners by Teach Yourself. On a practical level, yes, it's designed for language acquisition. But neurologically for Ryan, the simplicity of the text forces a deceleration of his thoughts.
Oh, because it's hard to read.
Because when you are reading a language you are not fluent in, you have to concentrate on every single word, every grammatical structure.
Ah, I see. You can't just skim it. You can't let your mind wander to tomorrow's budget meeting, because if you do, you lose the plot of the story entirely.
Precisely. This intense, localized concentration forces the brain's default mode network to quiet down.
The default mode network, what is that exactly?
It's the part of our brain responsible for rumination, for worrying about the future, and for regretting the past.
Oh, the anxiety center, basically.
Pretty much. By hyper-focusing on translating a simple story about everyday life, Ryan is inadvertently practicing a form of active mindfulness. The stories are about basic human choices and everyday emotions, which brings him a completely unfamiliar sensation.
Wow, that's a great trick. And then a few days later, he moves on to another resource, right?
Right.
The book is called Learn English Through Stories, 16 Stories to Improve Your English Grammar and English Vocabulary. And this book acts as a mirror for him.
It really confronts him.
Totally. One of the stories is literally about a man who spent his entire life relentlessly chasing money, only to realize he entirely forgot to experience the present moment. Ryan reads this simple, beginner-level English story, and it just stops him in his tracks.
It hits him hard.
The narrative strips away all the complex justifications he usually uses for his ambition. It presents his own life to him in the simplest possible terms.
It's a moment of profound self-reflection triggered by an incredibly unassuming medium.
Yeah.
Complex philosophical treatises might have made Ryan defensive, but a beginner English story bypasses those defenses.
It sneaks right past the ego.
Exactly. Then he adds a third resource to his daily commute: effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. He listens to this audio program instead of stressing about work on his way to the office.
And the core methodology of that audio program delivers a philosophical gut punch to Ryan, because the entire premise of the program is that learning should feel natural, growth must be consistent, and the process should never be rushed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally challenges his worldview.
Right. Learning a language is the perfect analogy for Omar's philosophy on life.
Exactly. Think about his previous formula: force the inputs, grind through the hours, extract the result. Language learning vehemently rejects that formula.
You can't bribe your brain into understanding complex grammar overnight. You can't just work a 14-hour day and suddenly become fluent.
No, you can't.
You have to experience it step by step, allowing the neural pathways to form organically. You can't buy fluency.
These English language books function as Trojan horses in Ryan's life. On the surface, his conscious objective is to acquire new vocabulary. But subconsciously, they are actively retraining his nervous system.
That's fascinating.
They are teaching him that genuine, sustainable growth, whether acquiring a new language or building a meaningful life, must be organic and unpressured. It is a direct, structural counter-argument to his old habit of rushing and forcing everything for immediate gain.
So Ryan uses these language exercises to basically create mental breathing room. And by quieting the noise in his head, he finally establishes the internal space required to audit his own life.
Yeah.
He shifts his core internal question from, how can I earn more, to what actually matters to me, which is a huge turning point.
A massive paradigm shift.
But I'm curious what this actually looks like in practice. Having a revelation on your commute is great, but Ryan still has rent to pay, right?
Right. He doesn't live in a fantasy world.
So how does a profound internal shift translate to the reality of navigating a modern career?
It translates through the implementation of tangible boundaries. Ryan doesn't quit his job and move to a cabin in the woods. He still works hard and fulfills his responsibilities. But he stops treating his job as his entire identity. He starts leaving the office on time whenever possible. He makes a point to call his family more frequently. He goes out with his friends and is fully present with them.
Like he isn't secretly obsessing over work emails under the table while pretending to listen to a conversation.
Exactly. He reclaims his attention, and he continues reading and practicing his English, not because he's pressured to achieve a certain fluency level by a deadline, but simply for the intrinsic joy of personal growth.
It becomes a quiet revolution in his daily routine.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I'm looking at the conclusion of the source text, where it outlines a checklist for what it calls true success.
And what's on that list?
It distills the concept down to 5 essential pillars. We've got peace of mind, good health, meaningful relationships, having the time to enjoy life, and continuous personal growth.
That's a solid list.
But I'm looking at this list, and I have to push back a little here. Money is noticeably absent. Are we supposed to pretend money doesn't matter at all in this new definition of success?
Yeah.
If we take Ryan's epiphany and strip away the luxury cars and high-paying salaries, what is the actual tangible checklist doing here? How does this source reconcile peace of mind with the realities of inflation and paying bills?
Well, the source doesn't ignore the reality of money. Rather, it demotes money from the lead role to a supporting character.
Okay, explain that.
In this multidimensional framework of success, money's only job is to provide enough comfort and stability to allow those 5 core pillars to thrive.
Right.
If you are sacrificing your health, your relationships, and your peace of mind to acquire more money, you are failing the success metric. Money is merely the scaffolding, not the building itself.
That distinction changes everything. It reframes our priorities completely.
It does.
I mean, we've followed Ryan on this journey from being an exhausted, stressed-out guy relentlessly chasing a digital illusion of luxury to finding profound, quiet contentment.
And he didn't find it by winning the lottery or getting a massive promotion.
No. He found it by setting boundaries, reading beginner English stories to neurologically slow his brain down, and consciously prioritizing internal balance over the size of his bank account.
He stopped trying to solve the broken math equation of his life, and instead he changed the metrics he was using to measure his days.
Which brings us to a question we want to pose directly to you, the listener. Think about your own daily routines, your own stressors, the things you prioritize when you are overwhelmed. Ask yourself honestly, what does success really mean to me?
As the text notes, your honest answer to that single question dictates where you spend your energy, your time, and ultimately your life.
It really is the foundation of everything else you build. Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that really struck me about Ryan's method.
What's that?
Well, think about Ryan sitting peacefully in his apartment at the end of the story. He already lived in that nice apartment while he was miserable.
No, that's true.
Right. If the ultimate realization of success is just having the time to breathe and enjoy the present moment, does that mean true success isn't a destination we have to earn our way toward, but simply the sudden awareness that we already have everything we need to be content right now?
That is a profound way to look at it.
And think about how he got there. Ryan found his way out of extreme, advanced-level burnout by forcing himself to go back to reading beginner-level English stories. He found peace in an activity where he was entirely incompetent and had no pressure to be an expert.
There's unique relief in allowing yourself to be a novice.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, where else in our lives are we suffering simply because we refuse to be a beginner again? We cling so tightly to our expertise, our titles, and our competence that it becomes a cage of pressure.
It's exhausting to always have to be the expert.
So, what if the secret to avoiding burnout isn't mastering your current field, but finding a completely new arena where you are allowed to be entirely clueless? Something for you to explore on your own. Keep questioning your metrics, stay curious, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Have you ever had that incredibly frustrating experience where you are perfectly following along with something really complex in another language?
Oh, like watching a fast-paced foreign movie without subtitles?
Yeah, exactly. Or, maybe eavesdropping on a conversation at a cafe, and you understand every single nuance. You feel like an absolute linguistic genius.
Oh, right. You are totally with it.
But then someone turns to you and asks a really simple question in that same language, and you completely freeze.
Oh, it is the worst. It's this universal, uniquely agonizing thing. You have this massive vocabulary floating around in your subconscious, but the second you try to speak, it just vanishes.
It vanishes. It feels like your brain suddenly severs the connection to your vocal cords.
I mean, it really feels like a fundamental betrayal by your own brain.
Totally. Why does our mind feel like an absolute supercomputer when we are passively listening, but then it immediately downgrades to a rusty, broken typewriter the second we actually try to speak?
That is the million-dollar question, right? That massive canyon between passive understanding and active fluency.
And that canyon is exactly our focus for today's deep dive. We are unpacking some really fascinating source material centered around a practical story of an English learner named Lena.
Yeah, and Lena's story is just the perfect lens for this because she is dealing with this exact plateau.
She is completely stuck.
Completely stuck, despite years of intense study. And she has hit a wall that many of you listening have probably hit in your own learning journeys.
Whether it's a spoken language or, a programming language or even just public speaking. So we tear into why this mental block happens and, more importantly, how to actually break through it.
Let's start by looking at Lena's initial state, because I think a lot of you are going to see yourselves in her frustration.
For sure. The source notes that Lena has been learning English for a long time. I mean, she is far from a beginner.
Right. She can comfortably watch movies. She reads articles without constantly reaching for a dictionary.
Exactly. She can follow native-level conversations effortlessly. She has put the hours in.
Her comprehension is incredibly high. Like, the linguistic database in her head is fully stocked.
Fully stocked. But when it's her turn to speak, everything just falls apart. She pauses. She desperately searches for words she knows.
The source even mentions she sometimes forgets the most basic sentence structures.
Yeah, and she falls into this classic, really demoralizing internal monologue. She just keeps telling herself, I understand English, but I just cannot speak it.
Which sounds like an intelligence issue, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a cognitive failure.
It does. But think about a huge music fan who has studied music theory for like a decade. They can look at complex sheet music and hear the entire symphony perfectly in their head.
Oh, yeah. They know the tempo, the dynamics, the key changes.
Exactly. But they have literally never sat down and pressed a key on a piano in their entire life.
Right.
So is the problem that this person doesn't understand music, or is the problem just that they are trying to play an instrument they have never actually touched?
That is such a great analogy. It cuts straight to the core of what psychologists call the illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence. Break that down for us.
Well, we frequently mistake our ability to recognize a pattern for our ability to actually produce that pattern.
Oh, okay.
Reading sheet music or passively listening to a language is deeply cognitive. Your brain is decoding signals. But physically striking the piano keys or, articulating foreign syllables with your mouth, that is overwhelmingly physical.
So Lena is confusing a total lack of physical motor skill practice with a lack of intellectual understanding.
Exactly. And that physical aspect brings us to a massive paradigm shift in the source material.
Right, because Lena is so frustrated that she decides to completely overhaul her approach. She joins a practical language workshop and meets a coach named David.
And David watches her struggle to speak for a few minutes, but he doesn't correct her grammar.
Nope. He doesn't hand her a new list of vocabulary flashcards either. He just smiles and drops this bombshell that completely redefines fluency for her.
He tells her, your problem is not your brain, it's your mouth.
It's your mouth, which is just, I mean, it's a profoundly disruptive way to view learning.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because we are so heavily conditioned to view language as an academic pursuit.
Oh, I actually have to push back on David here a bit because this contradicts literally everything we are taught in the traditional education system.
How so?
From day one, school teaches us that language is purely cognitive. You know, you memorize vocabulary lists, you take written tests on grammar rules.
Right, analyzing the present perfect versus the past continuous.
Exactly. It's treated like a math equation where you just plug in the right variables. If my brain already knows the rules and holds the vocabulary, shouldn't my mouth just automatically follow orders?
You'd think so, right? Like, why wouldn't the hardware just run the software?
Exactly.
Well, it's because the hardware is vastly more complicated than we give it credit for. When David says speaking is a physical skill, he is talking about the sheer biomechanical complexity of human speech.
The gymnastics your face has to perform.
Right. Your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your vocal cords, your diaphragm, they all require these incredibly complex split-second movements to produce the specific sounds and rhythms of a new language.
And your native language relies on heavily worn motor pathways, right?
Exactly. Trying to speak a new language is like asking a white-handed tennis player to suddenly play an entire match with their left hand.
Oh, wow.
The brain knows the rules of tennis, obviously, but the left arm simply does not have the neuromuscular coordination to execute the swing.
So it is quite literally a biological difference in how the brain operates. It makes so much sense. I always feel like my brain is gaslighting me when I can understand a Spanish podcast perfectly, but I can't even order a coffee.
Well, you're actually using entirely different neural networks for those two things.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Passive comprehension relies heavily on Wernicke's area in the brain, which processes language input. But speech production, that requires Broca's area and the motor cortex to send thousands of microcommands down to your face and throat.
So David is basically validating Lena's intellect.
Right. He's telling her that her cognitive database is totally full, but she just hasn't spent any time training her motor cortex to fire those specific sequences.
Because knowing the acoustic theory of how a French R sounds is completely divorced from the physical act of making your tongue vibrate that way in real time.
Exactly. Under the pressure of an actual conversation, theory goes out the window.
Okay, so once Lena accepts this, that she's not failing an intelligence test, but she's just lacking physical conditioning, Coach David gives her a new prescription.
He tells her, don't study more, speak more.
Which sounds simple, but he lays out what is essentially a 4-step physical workout routine for her facial muscles. Let's look at how he constructs this, because it bypasses all those cognitive traps we just talked about.
Step 1 is incredibly straightforward. He starts her off by having her read out loud for 5 to 10 minutes every single day.
But wait, if I am just reading words off a page, I'm not really generating my own thoughts. How does that help me speak spontaneously later?
Removing the need to think is actually the entire point of that first exercise.
Really?
Yeah. When you try to speak a new language, generating the thought, translating the vocabulary, applying the grammar, and moving your mouth, it all happens simultaneously. It's a massive cognitive load.
Oh, so by reading out loud, the words and grammar are already provided for you.
Exactly. You completely remove the cognitive burden of invention, and that frees up 100% of your brain's bandwidth to focus purely on the physical articulation of the syllables.
Oh, that makes sense. You are isolating the muscle group, just like isolating a bicep curl at the gym.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But reading out loud only gets the physical muscles moving.
Right. Surely that just makes you sound like a robotic textbook. You're just pronouncing isolated words.
How does David get her to sound like an actual human being with rhythm?
That brings us to step 2, a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing.
Yeah. It involves listening to native audio, like a podcast or an audiobook, and repeating the sentences immediately after hearing them. You are almost talking over the speaker.
Wow, that sounds intense. It is, but it's a brilliant mechanism because it trains the ear and the mouth in tandem You are forced to mimic the cadence, the intonation, and the speed of a native speaker.
So you stop learning isolated words and start feeling the actual musicality and flow of the language.
Exactly. Okay, so she's reading out loud to isolate the muscles, and she's shadowing to find the rhythm. But she still has to eventually generate her own thoughts.
Right, which leads to step 3. David tells her to start narrating her day out loud, even if she is completely alone in her apartment.
I love this step. It bridges that gap towards spontaneous thought, but without the crushing social pressure of someone staring at you, waiting for you to finish your sentence.
Yeah, talking to an empty room is way less intimidating. But then we hit the final part of David's routine, step 4. And I'm going to stop you right here because I violently reject this premise.
Uh-oh. Let me guess. The recording.
Yes. He tells her she has to record her own voice and listen back to it. I mean, I would rather chew glass than listen to a recording of my own voice in my native language, let alone stumbling through a language I'm bad at.
It is brutal, I know.
Why is leaning into that extreme, visceral cringe actually necessary for this to work?
Because the cringe you feel is exactly where the learning happens. David warns her it will be incredibly uncomfortable.
Understatement of the year.
Well, we avoid recording ourselves because we prefer the idealized, flawless version of how we sound in our own heads, right?
Right.
But when you hit play on that recording, you activate the auditory feedback loop. You are suddenly confronted with the objective, brutal reality of your physical execution.
Oh, man. So you hear the exact canyon between what your supercomputer brain wanted to output and what your broken typewriter mouth actually produced.
Precisely. You hear every clumsy transition, every vowel you swallowed, every unnatural pause.
It sounds like torture.
But from a neurological standpoint, it is essential. Your brain needs that objective auditory feedback to realize, oh, the motor command I sent to the tongue did not produce the sound I wanted.
So it uses that awkwardness to calibrate and adjust for the next attempt.
Yes, you cannot fix a flaw in your physical form if you refuse to look at the game tape. Elite athletes watch footage of themselves constantly, right?
Yeah.
Anyone trying to build physical fluency has to do the same.
Okay, that makes sense. Having this workout plan is one thing, but actually putting the reps in is where most of us fail. Let's look at how Lena executes this routine, because the tool she chooses seem totally counterintuitive to me.
The timeline in the source is really interesting here.
Yeah, on day 1, she grabs a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners, and later she moves to Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
She also adds in habits from Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native, which is huge on repetition and listening.
Right. But wait, if we establish that Lena already has high comprehension, like she can watch complex movies, why on earth is she reading beginner books? Isn't she massively regressing?
It looks like a regression if you are still viewing language as an intellectual pursuit. But under the physical training paradigm, it makes perfect sense.
How so?
Imagine you walk into a gym to learn a highly complex Olympic weightlifting move, like a barbell snatch. You might be incredibly strong, but you've never done this specific lift.
Right. You wouldn't load the barbell with 300 pounds on your first day.
Exactly. You start with a hollow PVC pipe.
Because if you try to lift heavy while learning a complex movement, your form collapses entirely.
Yes. The beginner short stories are the linguistic equivalent of that PVC pipe. They use basic vocabulary and very straightforward linear sentence structures.
Oh, which keeps the mental weight extremely light.
Precisely. Her brain never has to stop and struggle to comprehend what is happening in the plot, which allows her to dedicate all of her energy to how her mouth is physically moving around those words.
If she tried reading a dense textbook out loud, she would be dragged right back into her own head, overanalyzing the grammar.
And her physical form would completely fall apart. She'd be stumbling over every word.
Keep the mental weight light so you can perfect the physical form. That is brilliant. And we actually see the biological adaptation happen on her timeline.
The source notes that the first week feels incredibly strange and awkward.
But by week 2, this massive shift occurs. Her mouth starts moving faster, she stops less. There is this beautiful breakthrough moment detailed in the text where she is just making coffee one morning.
And she starts doing her solo narration exercise.
Yeah, she says to herself, today I will go to work early. I have a meeting at 10. After that, I want to finish my project. She pauses and she smiles because for the first time, it actually feels effortless.
We can point directly to the biology of what is happening in her brain during that kitchen scene. She is experiencing myelination.
Myelination. Break that down for us.
Okay, so every time Lena practices reading out loud or shadowing, A specific neural circuit fires in her brain, sending a signal down to her vocal cords and facial muscles.
Okay, tracking with you.
When you repeat a physical action consistently, your nervous system responds by wrapping those specific neural pathways in a fatty, insulating substance called myelin.
Interesting.
The thicker that myelin sheath gets around the nerve, the faster and more efficiently the electrical signal travels.
Oh, it's like upgrading from a dial-up internet connection to fiber optics.
That is the exact mechanism of muscle memory. The awkwardness she felt in week 1 was just the slow, uninsulated firing of new neural pathways.
But by week 2, she had laid down enough myelin through daily repetition that the signals were traveling at lightning speed.
Right. She didn't have to consciously translate her thoughts anymore. The physical execution became automatic. It's biology, not just trying harder.
Okay, so she's laid down that myelin while making coffee and reading beginner stories. But eventually, she has to test this out in the real world.
Right, the ultimate stress test.
Weeks pass. She keeps up this daily practice, and she finally returns to a group conversation at the language workshop. She opens her mouth and speaks. And the source is very careful to highlight a specific detail here. She does not speak flawlessly.
No, she still makes mistakes.
But she speaks clearly, naturally, and crucially without stopping every 2 seconds to desperately search for words.
And Coach David watches this and tells her, your brain always knew English. Now your mouth is learning too.
She bridged the gap.
She connected the high-capacity storage of Wernicke's area with the physical output machinery of Broca's area.
Afterwards, she writes in her notebook, "Today, I spoke more easily. I didn't stop too much. I felt confident." She realized that fluency isn't some mystical gift for outgoing people. It's a mechanical byproduct of practice.
But there's a critical mindset shift she maintained during all this. The source is, she doesn't try to be perfect. She just tries to be consistent.
Why is surrendering the need to be perfect, actually, the secret weapon here? I mean, traditional schooling penalizes every single imperfection.
Because perfectionism is the ultimate cognitive trap. It physically paralyzes you. When you demand perfection in a spoken conversation, your brain acts like a hyper-aggressive internal editor.
Oh, I know that editor very well.
Right. Every time you are about to speak, the editor slams the brakes and shouts, "Wait, are you sure that is the correct preposition? Did you use the right verb tense?"
And that intense internal editing is what causes those long, agonizing physical pauses, paralysis by analysis.
Exactly. It shatters the physical rhythm of communication. By giving up the need to be perfect, you essentially fire that internal editor.
You just let the physical muscle memory run its course.
You will inevitably say things wrong, but you will maintain the fluid exchange of ideas. Over time, as those neural pathways strengthen, the grammatical accuracy naturally catches up to the speed.
But you can never achieve fluidity if you are constantly hitting the emergency brake to check your grammar.
Right. You have to be willing to play a few wrong notes on the piano to keep the momentum of the song going.
Lena felt proud, not because her grammar was flawless, but because she kept the rhythm going. She shifted her identity from a student who studies rules to an athlete who trains a physical skill.
It's so empowering. If you are listening to this right now and wondering why your Spanish hasn't improved despite hours on an app, or why you freeze during public speaking, look at Lena's approach.
It wasn't about adding hours of grueling study. It was about radically changing how she spent 15 minutes of her day, swapping passive absorption for active physical repetition.
Exactly.
So if we synthesize everything we have extracted from Lena's journey today, the core message is incredibly liberating. If you understand a subject, a language, or a concept perfectly, but you struggle to articulate it out loud, cut yourself some slack.
Your brain already possesses significantly more knowledge than you are giving it credit for.
The massive canyon you are staring down is not a lack of intelligence. It is purely a lack of physical neuromuscular conditioning. It's a hardware issue, not a software issue.
Do not wait until you feel intellectually ready or grammatically perfect to start speaking. Just start putting the physical reps in.
Read a simple story out loud. Shadow a native speaker on a podcast. Talk to your coffee maker about your plans for the day. Confront the cringe of your own recorded voice.
Train your facial muscles the exact same way you would train for a marathon. It will always feel clumsy before it feels effortless.
Because that awkwardness is just the feeling of your nervous system building new pathways. Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you mulling over today. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about foreign languages. But if speaking a language, something society universally views as a marker of pure intellectual prowess, is actually just a physical muscle memory waiting to be developed, what other massive intellectual struggles or mental blocks in your life are actually just physical skills disguised as cognitive ones?
That is a fascinating question.
Maybe that supercomputer brain of yours is doing absolutely fine, and you just need to start hammering away at that broken typewriter until the keys finally loosen up. We will catch you on the next deep dive.